Got new information about when we might hear about some of the top picks for the incoming Trump administration. Winding down the federal cases against Donald Trump, Special Counsel Jack Smith in talks with Justice Department leaders. What options does he really have left? And a major decision coming today from the Federal Reserve on interest rates. Will we see another cut? What impact could the proposed Trump tariffs have on their decision? I'm John Berman with Kate Baldwin and Sarah Seidner. This is CNN News Central.
This morning, President-elect Donald Trump's transition back to power already in full swing. And to stick with Trump's favorite pastime, a whole bunch of highly critical questions are right now teed up. Who will be in his ear in the Oval Office? Several names are being floated for his cabinet. And what will become of Trump's day one promises, his legal cases, and what about his party's power in Congress? Control of the House still up for grabs, but Republicans this morning seem more and more on track to keep control there after winning back the Senate. Elena Trine is leading us off from outside of Mar-a-Lago this morning. Elena, a lot going on near you. I know there's a lot of conversations happening. What can you share with us that you're hearing this morning?
That's right, there are. And look, Donald Trump's team has begun setting up offices and kind of making this the headquarters here in Palm Beach for Donald Trump's transition. Now, we know that a lot of people over the past several days, but also more so in the past 24 hours, once it became clear that Donald Trump was going to be the president and win the election, have really ramped up their efforts and kind of that behind-the-scenes jockeying for some of these top roles. Roles that I should say that Donald Trump really had no interest in seriously discussing prior to him winning. He is superstitious. He did not want to get really into the weeds of who he would be selecting for his cabinet and other key roles. But that has, of course, changed now, and they are really, in go mode, trying to sort this out before Inauguration Day. Now, some of the key positions that I know Donald Trump values most are the ones that are, of course, being the most heavily discussed behind the scenes. One of the big questions is who will be his chief of staff. Now, a lot of people have argued that Susie Wiles, his Trump's campaign manager, should be considered for chief of staff. She has been floated. However, I'm also hearing from others that some people believe that she would be better in a role like a counselor role or a senior advisor role, similar to what we saw Kellyanne Conway, his former 2016 campaign manager, do in that first administration. Some other names, though, being floated for that are Russ Vought. He's someone who was worked in the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, I should say, but also has remained very close to Donald Trump in his role as the head of a key conservative policy shop that has been working closely with Trump and its allies. We've also heard names like Brooke Rollins and Bob Lighthizer. Now, another big role that I think is maybe the biggest role in Donald Trump's mind is the question of who will be his attorney general. Donald Trump has said in the past that he has regretted selecting people like Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr to run the Department of Justice. This is going to be a huge question for Donald Trump, particularly as we know he has kind of promised to seek retribution on political opponents and has told and said publicly to others in the past that he believes he is justified in seeking that type of retribution. Some names we've heard for that or Ken Paxton of Texas, who has also, like Trump, been impeached. We've also heard of Mike Lee, the senator from Utah, other names being floated for that. But I think that's going to be one of the key roles to keep your eye on, given how much Donald Trump believes that is a very important role that he wants to fill.
Yeah, clearly does not want the guardrails that were put in place by those who he did not appreciate during his first administration. Elena Trine, thank you so much for all your reporting. I know it's been a long few days. Kate?
So this morning, President Biden is set to address the nation for the first time on camera before cameras since Donald Trump's election victory. CNN's Arlette Saenz is at the White House for us tracking this. Arlette, what are you hearing about what President Biden's going to say?
Well, Kate, the nation will hear from President Biden for the first time since voters decided to send Donald Trump back to the White House next year. His speech is really expected to reflect on this election as well as talk about the transition forward. Advisors to Biden have said that he is committed to ensuring that there is a peaceful transfer of power. That is something that Biden was not afforded by Trump back in the 2020 race. And the president has already called President-elect Trump to congratulate him on his victory and invite him here to the White House. Sources say that is a meeting that could potentially happen as early as next week. Now, the president yesterday released a statement relating to the election and only talked about Vice President Kamala Harris, saying that she ran a historic campaign under extraordinary circumstances. The president last night also had the chance to address the staff here at the White House by phone, where he talked about something that he could also mention in his speech today, saying, quote, "While I am sure you're all feeling a variety of emotion today, I hope there's one emotion you didn't lose sight of. That's pride. Pride in everything we've accomplished." He then ran through a number of initiatives he thinks will have lasting impact in this country. But one big question going into this speech is whether President Biden will address in any way what exactly went wrong for Democrats that prompted their loss against Trump in this election. There has been a lot of soul searching and questioning about messaging and strategy over the last 48 hours. And there's also been a lot of blame and finger pointing directed at President Biden. There are many Democrats who believe that he really hampered their Democratic chances in this election by even deciding to run for a second term in the first place. And then by the time he had bowed out, there were just over 100 days left for any Democratic nominee to run this race. So we'll see if he addresses that in any way. But he is now facing this new reality where his predecessor will be returning to the White House next year. And the White House says that he insists on ensuring there is a peaceful and smooth transition in the meantime.
Yeah, and in the meantime, what is Biden planning to do with the remaining months in the White House?
Well, in that call with White House staff last night, the White House Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients, told them that there is still so much more work to do and they need to focus on that in these closing months. Now, there are a number of agenda items that staffers and aides are focused on as they're really trying to safeguard key parts of Biden's legacy at a time when Trump has threatened to undo some of Biden's initiatives. One area that they're going to be focused on is trying to get more aid to Ukraine at a time when future U.S. support for Ukraine is in question. They're also going to focus on implementing legislative pieces of legislation like the infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, trying to get more money out the door for these types of projects. There's also a potential that they could focus on judicial nominations in these closing months as Democrats have control in the Senate. But for President Biden, so much of his legacy will be tied up in this election, and so they will be trying to work to try to safeguard some of that in the months to come. John.
All right, Arlette Saenz at the White House. Arlette, thank you very much. With us now, our senior political commentator, Scott Jennings, former special assistant to President George W. Bush, and Van Jones, former Obama administration official. So really the focus is now on what's next. And I guess the first what's next in terms of the Trump transition is who he surrounds himself with. Who do you think he will? What will it tell us? What are your big concerns?
Well, I'm sure he's getting bombarded, with people who want to come in. The trick of any transition is finding the best possible team and people who are loyal to your agenda and who want to execute on that, but also stay within your leadership parameters. That's how you build this thing. So, look, I think he's got some great people putting it together. I think Linda McMahon and Howard Lutnick and some of the staff that are working on it have been working for months diligently. I think they have a plan. He's got a lot of people to review. I'm sure they put together lists. Here are the top 10 people for each job. And he's got a lot of people to review, a lot of files to review, a lot of pros and cons lists to go over. It's a lot. This is when the decision making of the presidency really hits.
You think he'll pick the best people or the most loyal?
I think, yes. I mean, I'm not
non-answer.
I'm not sure they're mutually exclusive in a lot of cases. And here's what I also think. I think a lot of people are going to want to go work for him. They're going to want to be part of it. And now, because you've got a full Republican government, most likely, in Washington, look what you can do for the next 2 years. It's a really valuable thing.
So what he just said, Van, a full Republican government, look what you can do. From the Democratic side, then, again, looking forward, what can you do? What would you like to see Democrats do in positioning themselves?
Therapy. Prayer. What can we do? We just got run over by a train. At this point, look, two things to observe. this is not the same opportunity for Trump as last time. Last time, it felt like a fluke. He seemed like a clown, and people weren't sure what to do with this guy. When you have the kind of unbelievable avalanche victory he just had, he can get anybody. I mean, that's a different thing. And so watch who he picks, because he could literally, when you're going in with the popular vote, the Electoral College, the Senate, the House, I mean, he got $1 billion extra yesterday just for waking up with the stock market. When you're riding that kind of high, you don't have to pick weirdos. You don't have to pick mean people. You don't have to pick people whose Twitter accounts are full of white nationalist garbage. You can pick literally the best. If he chooses not to, if he chooses people who would be objectionable to anybody's standard, then that lets you know something very, very scary about where he's going.
So where do Democrats fight? Where do they choose to pick their battles, and where do they choose to work with it?
Right now, we still have somebody hit us upside the head with a baseball bat, and we're still literally just running around in circles. So we're going to have to wait and see, what does he do? Who does he pick? If he picks some total weirdos or some scary people or people who we think are Russian operatives, we will focus on that. But here's the thing: we are now surrounded and outnumbered. So strategically, it's 10 against 1. Tactically, it might be might go the other way. We might pick this one, pick that one. But we're still 48 hours into a different world. And anybody who tells you they know what Democrats are going to do is lying.
I'm interested to see how the Democrats play this, because I think one of the things that people told us was, we need a moment's peace.
Yep.
The mandate was clear. And the last time Trump got in, there wasn't a moment's peace. There was plotting to try to type his administration right out of the gate. And, there's been some of that plotting already. My advice to Dems would be, read the room. The American people responded to what he ran on. They want something to happen. It would be a folly, in my opinion, to not give him a chance to govern. He clearly has earned it.
Can I just say, though, and I don't want to look backwards, but there is a double standard here, right? Because already the Democrats have done two things that Donald Trump never did when he lost and hasn't done. Number one, say he lost, right? Kamala Harris came out and said she lost, conceded right there. Number two, the outgoing administration has reached out its hand and said, hey, let's have a transition here. Yeah. Democrats have already done that. Trump did, and it is worth marking that.
Look, I'm proud that we are not hypocrites.
Yeah.
When we say you respect the will of the voters, we are respecting the will of the voters. And when we say peaceful transition of power, listen to Joe Biden today defend the democratic republic that we have in his words and his deeds.
This is not politics, and shouldn't be politics. Stepping back, like way back here, just in terms of a society, how you guys think we can and should be steering the level of conversation. Wired Magazine did a piece this morning where they picked out some of the comments that have been made on social media. And I know social media, it is what it is here, but some of these people have been the most supportive of Donald Trump in the past. This is not Donald Trump speaking here, but Nick Fuentes updates.
Oh, God.
Women lose again. Your body, our choice.
He didn't vote for Trump, by the way.
That seal. That's what I said. This is not. I'm taking this higher. That ceiling is made out of brick. Another person. Big shout out to men, especially white men, who turned out and forced to put women back in their place. Another one. Project 2025 is real. Women back to the kitchen. Abortion is illegal. Gays back in the closet. It goes on. There is this stuff.
There are mean people everywhere, and there are trolls who are trying to get attention everywhere. Yes. But look, I don't think that's where most people are at, honestly.
Right.
I think most of the people I think voted for the Trump agenda were holding their nose on some of that stuff, and they were just voting for change and out of economic pain. That's what I honestly believe. Now, that doesn't mean we don't need to deal with the trolls. Right. But that's not the majority of Americans.
These people are trying to get attention for their own purposes on Trump's back. This is not how Trump won. Trump won because people are unhappy with the economy. They were unhappy with the current administration. They want change. And now they want some action on the basic fundamental issues that they see are broken with the country. This is garbage. This is not what Trump is going to do. I don't think this is what his people want being portrayed about how they intend to operate. He's got a huge opportunity. He's not backing into the office. Mm-hmm. Clear mandate, popular vote, landslide. He's not backing in. He's pulling straight in with the wind at his back and a chance to do something amazing. And I actually think he's going to do it.
We'll see. And I think that for Democrats, we have to take a breath here. It's very easy to say it's race, it's gender. There is that element. But there are other elements too. We did not build the kind of media communications infrastructure the same way that Trump caught us off guard by being on Twitter when we didn't understand Twitter. He did the same thing to us on podcasts. But we keep falling behind the Trump innovation team. They've got engineers on their team. They've got entrepreneurs on their team. They think differently about politics. We're too homogenous in terms of having a bunch of lawyers, having a bunch of people who've been in government trying to think this stuff through. We got beat. That's what happened. Now, is there racism? Absolutely. Sexism? But if you focus on that, you miss the opportunity for innovation on our side, and frankly, for respect of the other side, what they achieved. They beat us. You got to sit down. You got to eat your Wheaties. You got to learn and come back and deal with them in 2 years. In the meantime, therapy. Therapy.
Van Jones, this segment brought to you by BetterHelp. Van Jones, Scott Jennings, thank you both very much. New this morning, the leader of China is sending his congratulations to President-elect Trump despite the promise of higher tariffs. New science that says playing in your school band could help your brain stay young. So I play trumpet, which explains why I have the brain of a 12-year-old. Not sure that came out like I meant it to.
Coming in new overnight, Chinese leader Xi Jinping offering his congratulations to President-elect Donald Trump, saying he hopes they can, quote, get along in the new era. But hanging over that and left unsaid there is Donald Trump's threat to slap a 60% tariff on all Chinese imports. CNN's Mark Stewart joins us now for more on this. How is the Trump victory being received in China? Mark?
Hi, Kate. Good morning. Look, Beijing is trying to play things safe because it wasn't that long ago that leaders here in China would stay awake at night wondering what would happen next. And if we look at this message of congratulations from Xi Jinping, there's just a lot of safe diplomatic speak in it, talking about win-win cooperation and mutual respect. This is a complicated relationship between these two world leaders. At one time, they bonded together in Mar-a-Lago over chocolate cake, but then things turned frosty when it came to China's response over COVID. And then, of course, these very difficult issues concerning free trade and tariffs. And the prospect of more tariffs is something that is weighing heavily on the Chinese public. We have looked at social media. There is certainly a lot of mention about this, a potential trade war perhaps in the works when the Chinese economy is dealing with its own struggles. Kate, when we look at Chinese foreign policy, at times it very much operates under this principle: if you hurt us, we're going to do something to hurt you back, laying the groundwork for perhaps more trade tension.
And then there's the question of Taiwan. I mean, what could happen if Trump dials back U.S. support for Taiwan?
Right, Taiwan, really security of the whole region. I mean, one thing which we have heard from Trump in the past is that he is very critical of alliances such as NATO. You could argue that could work in China's favor, almost give it license to do what it wants with Taiwan as well as the South China Sea. One thing you have to remember, while Trump is certainly pushing this America First agenda, China is also trying to show its strength very much, Kate, trying to establish itself as the leader of a new world order, an alternative to the West.
Mark Stewart, thank you. Sarah?
All right, thank you so much, Kate. World leaders are reacting, of course, to former President Trump returning to the White House and what that can mean for international relations. Joining me now to discuss our CNN political and national security analyst, David Sanger, as well as Josh Rogin, Washington Post columnist. Thank you both for being here. We heard Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying, look, they had a call. The call was excellent. But we've also heard from Donald Trump and what he plans to do to, quote, end the war on day one. And we're seeing some new reporting from the Wall Street Journal. And I just kind of wanted to go through that because you wrote this really amazing piece in the New York Times as well, kind of looking at what we could all be expecting. And it says that there's an idea proposed that would involve Kyiv promising not to join NATO for 20 years. And then in exchange, the U.S. would continue to give Ukraine a full cache of weapons to deter a future Russian attack. What do you think is going to happen here with Trump at the helm with Ukraine in its war with Russia?
So the critical issue with Ukraine has been who gets to decide the borders of the country. In other words, does Donald Trump call Vladimir Putin and say in one of his early conversations, so tell me what you need? And Putin comes back and says, I want the 20% of the country that we're currently occupying. At which point, the speculation is, and it's pure speculation because President-elect Trump has not said what he would do, is that he then calls Zelensky and says, do I have a deal for you? For just 20% of your country, a 20% you're not in right now anyway, you get to get an ending of this. The alternative is we cut off your funds and your military goods. Now, the 20 years outside of NATO, there have been ideas floating around the Biden administration for a while. It gets to a fundamental decision you have to make, which is ultimately, is Ukraine safer inside NATO or not? It commits the United States and others to defend them. But remember, Putin has not fired into any NATO country during these 3 years of war.
Right. Josh, I want to ask you about another war that is ongoing, that between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, which has been a huge contention and may have had an impact on what the electorate did. If you are Netanyahu at this point in time, what are you thinking?
Right. I think I agree with everything David said about Ukraine. I don't think the Trump administration foreign policy is set. I think it depends on who the personnel are. I think there's going to be internal factional battles and things could go back and forth. When it comes to the Israel-Gaza issue, however, there's very little mystery about what's going to happen. The Trump administration is going to give Netanyahu carte blanche and to do whatever he wants. And what Netanyahu wants to do is to downplay negotiations for a ceasefire and to persecute his wars in Lebanon and in Gaza without any objection or pressure from the United States. So that's exactly what's going to happen. So I think we can see that for the next months at least, that there will be less of a focus on negotiations and ceasefire and hostage deal and more of a full-throated support and a full moneyed and weapons support for Israel's aims as defined by Netanyahu, for better or worse.
All right, I do want to ask you about the thing that Americans have been talking about ad nauseum. Their number one issue is the economy. And Donald Trump had said some very interesting things when it comes to the economy. And you had written, David, about what you heard from him and whether or not this was going to be a free trade, that this is probably over. What do you make of the idea of sanctions and whether or not you think he's going to go forward with that? So
the core of the American leadership in the post-World War II era has been a largely free trade, not entirely free. Obviously, there have been, back and forth on this, and security umbrellas for our allies. And that's been the core of American power. We've already discussed, and Josh just discussed before, how the U.S. may pull back on some of the security commitments, and that issue came up during the first Trump administration. What Trump is now threatening is wide-scale tariffs, particularly on China. And the problem with tariffs is they run in both directions. And, of course, there'll be a reaction to that. And if you get into an old-scale tariff war, well, we saw what that looked like in the 1930s, and there are not many economists who think we want to go down that road again. What worries me the most, Sarah, is that in the discussion of China during the campaign, and here I put the blame on both candidates, we have discussed it as if tariffs are the solution to our China challenge, when in fact they're a very narrow part of it. China poses the biggest military threat, the biggest technological threat, the biggest economic threat, and of course, if it shrinks in size, demographically and economically, that alone is going to be a challenge for us as well. And we have not heard any discussion of that or the coming together of Russia and China, and that's the biggest new challenge.
Josh, what is your take on what Xi Jinping is thinking at this point, and if these tariffs go into effect, how that's going to affect all of the people here in America and potentially China as well?
Sure. In my conversations with many Chinese officials, they've all said exactly the same thing, that Trump's ascendancy, his return, is a high risk, high reward. They don't know which way it's going to go. It could be very bad for them, or it could be very good for them. The tariffs might come around, but they might not. Xi Jinping might be able to convince Trump to make a deal to hand over Tibet in exchange for a pile of beans, or maybe not. So these are the kinds of calculations that are going on in Beijing. They're preparing for either scenario, and basically, the more that American politics is divided, the more that American politics is in chaos, the better that is for them. And to what David spoke to, the fact that American credibility in its alliances, both in Europe and Asia, will certainly be in question in the next administration. That redounds to China's benefit and to Putin's benefit. And they're very happy to pick up any of the allies that the Trump administration may soon abandon.
David Sanger, Josh Rogan, thank you both so much. I really appreciate you coming on and having this interesting discussion. We will see what happens from here. John?
All right, standing by for the opening bell on Wall Street. It is just minutes away. Look at that, stock futures up again after the huge bump up yesterday. And happening now, 27 million people under a life-threatening fire warning.
Moments ago, the opening bell ringing on Wall Street, as it always does. And there are the numbers for you, down just a teeny tiny bit after Donald Trump's win. That's not what we saw yesterday, though. Today, investors are looking to the Federal Reserve, of course, as they are expected to make another rate cut. The big question now is how much they might actually slash. CNN business anchor Julia Chatterley joining me now. What are we expecting, and how have the markets been reacting? This is down a bit, but that's not what we saw.
You're wearing the right colour for what we saw yesterday, which was bumper gains, and it was relief on a decisive result, irrespective, I think, of who won ultimately. So a little bit of give back to Dad expect after those big gains. To your point, today is all about the do's and the don'ts for Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve. They want to be talking about the economy. They want to be talking about inflation continuing to slow. What they don't want to talk about, quite frankly, is Donald Trump. Good luck with that. So I'll give you the good news. They're expected to cut by 1/4 percentage point, so to add to the 0.5 percentage point cuts that we got in September. So that is good news for borrowers. And then it gets a little bit more exciting because, again, he doesn't want to be talking about the impact of potential tax cuts, mass tariffs being applied, immigration limits. And that makes sense because they can't react preemptively. They have to react to what they get. But we know mass immigration limits, mass tariffs are potentially going to hurt growth, and they're potentially going to be inflationary too. They'll raise prices. So he'll talk perhaps hypothetically about that. But what's key to me is we're not just watching stocks go up. We're also watching the cost of government borrowing going up. Stick with me because this is important. Some of that can be tied to stronger growth, which is good news. Some of that can be tied to the expectation of higher spending and also higher inflation. Why we care is because mortgage rates in the US far more sensitive to that than what the Fed is doing and when they're cutting rates. And that's why, if you're wondering why have mortgage rates in the US been going up over the past 6 weeks, it's tied to this. Trump's potential policy promises can make that worse. Now, the expectation for the Fed, they cut today, they cut December, they cut next year. Trump's plans could change that, and that's key.
And we will be waiting to see. The other thing that we would like to know,
yes, I know you're going to ask.
Happen.
Yeah.
So there has been this acidic relationship between Jerome Powell and Donald Trump. How are they going to work together?
Carefully, I would suggest. He's going to be asked today whether he's still going to have a job, whether he's going to stay in the job if he wants to. Remember, Trump was quite mean to him before. He's also going to be asked if he can remain independent. Again, he'll be careful about how he responds to these things. The irony is they're working together right now. Trump likes lower rates. The Federal Reserve is cutting rates. The challenge here is, and the real only impact that could be made, is Trump's own policies. They could ultimately cause the Fed to do less, not more, in terms of rate cuts. So ball in Trump's hands here. And here are some of the comments that he's made. He'd like to have a say. Hard luck. He shouldn't have a say. Fed needs to be independent.
And we will see what happens from this day forward.
I was about to say it's going to be exciting for another 4 years.
All right. I appreciate you. Thank you. Kate.
And joining us right now is CNN global economic analyst Rana Foroohar. She's also the global business columnist and associate editor at the Financial Times. It's great to see you, Rana. Let's start with market reaction first and foremost. What do you think of the market reaction to Donald Trump's victory?
Okay, so let's first say that almost after every presidential election, you see a bump in the market. I mean, there is a certain amount of, okay, now we know who the victor is, let's celebrate, we have certainty, the markets love certainty. The thing that's very interesting to me, though, when you think about it in particularly related to Trump, is that the markets are betting that he actually won't implement his said economic policies. What do I mean by that? Donald Trump ran on, I'm going to put 100% tariffs on China. I'm going to put tariffs on allies. I want a weaker dollar because I want to make American exports more competitive. Right now, the dollar's rising. The markets are up. This is not what the markets would be doing if they thought there was going to be a massive tariff implementation and a weaker dollar coming down the pike. Now, one thing that's interesting is that the bond market, which is, always where the smart money looks, it tends to be a little more forward-thinking, far-sighted than the equity markets. Bond markets are saying, ooh, we're a little nervous. We're worried about debt and deficit levels. You may remember, Kate, that during the election, there was a lot of talk about how Donald Trump's proposed policies would actually raise debt and deficit levels. The bond markets are saying, watch out, more debt might be coming. That could raise borrowing costs for Americans.
So let's talk about the tariffs. The proposed tariffs, or what he's campaigned on, is something like a 20% tariff on all imports and then a 60% tariff or so on all goods coming from China. He says he's doing it, he would do it to protect U.S. manufacturing. We've seen a lot of analysis that tariffs, though, eventually are just paid for by the U.S. consumer. What is the reality?
So, I see tariffs as one tool in an economic toolbox. They are sometimes used, as they were used during the Biden administration, as a targeted way of dealing with unfair trade practices. But what Donald Trump is proposing is very different. He's talking about across-the-board tariffs. And essentially, this is about protecting the U.S. market. It's about starting to look at the U.S. consumer market as a bit of a chit to be given out as a reward to countries or to allies if they are giving us something in return. It's a very different way of looking at the U.S. consumer market than we've seen for decades, really. Now, if you're going to implement that kind of very protectionist policy, you better be sure to have a strong, robust industrial strategy for manufacturing at home. We have heard nothing about that from Donald Trump. I mean, we heard a lot of rhetoric and we saw a lot of, talk, let's say, during the first Trump administration about protecting American jobs. But frankly, that did not happen. I think under the Biden administration, you did see the beginnings of industrial strategy. But Kate, this is a very, very difficult thing to implement. So tariffs with no industrial strategy at home, no way of actually bolstering U.S. manufacturing, very dangerous. And I think that introduces a real element of instability to the economy and to the marketplace.
Rana, great to see you. Thank you so much. So, did voters just clear the legal docket for President-elect Donald Trump? The new reporting that Special Counsel Jack Smith is in talks with top DOJ leadership to wind down those investigations. And he's a well-known vaccine skeptic and has been a dominant force in spreading conspiracy theories about vaccines for years. The new reporting on what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could mean for public health in this country if given the green light by the president-elect.
In winning the White House, President-elect Donald Trump may have also just won a get-out-of-jail-free card. His legal team, which had previously been pushing to delay the sentencing in his New York criminal hush money case, is now expected to ask the judge to cancel it altogether. CNN Chief Legal Affairs correspondent Paula Reed is in Washington for us. What are you learning, Paula, about that particular case?
Yeah, it's interesting. Trump's sentencing is currently scheduled for November 26th, but his lawyers are going to argue that it should be canceled. Now, usually they're asking for delays, trying to kick the can down the road, but here they're going to argue to this judge that as a president-elect, Trump is entitled to the same constitutional protections as a sitting president. As we know, sitting presidents, they are protected from indictment and prosecution, so here they're going to extend that also to sentencing. Now, if that argument doesn't work, the judge had previously self-imposed a deadline of November 12th to decide if the Supreme Court's decision on immunity over the summer means that Trump's conviction should be tossed out. If he decides that, then the sentencing obviously wouldn't go forward. But if the judge does not decide that the conviction should be tossed out, they will continue to make this constitutional argument. Again, they're not looking for a delay. They want this entire sentencing nixed.
All right, we've got another big case, perhaps the biggest case. Special Counsel Jack Smith is reportedly in talks with the Justice Department about winding down, so to speak, the election interference and classified documents case. What does that mean?
Yeah, over the next few days, we expect that these conversations between Jack Smith and top leaders at the Justice Department, including the Attorney General, will continue as they try to figure out how do they wind down cases. They are looking at an Office of Legal Counsel memo. So that's guidance inside the Justice Department that deals with those same issues that the Trump lawyers are going to argue in New York, how sitting presidents cannot be indicted or prosecuted. And they need to figure out, okay, well, how does that apply to a pending case? And it's complicated because it's not just Trump. He obviously had co-defendants, and it has to do with the entire special counsel's office, right? They have a budget, they have prosecutors. What happens to the office itself? So it's actually kind of a complicated thing to try to wind down. Trump had previously said when he gets in office, he's going to fire Jack Smith, or his Justice Department would fire Jack Smith and move to have the cases dismissed. But it looks like it probably won't come to that, and these cases will probably be gone before Trump arrives at the White House.
You've got another case in Georgia. Are you expecting the same sort of arguments from Trump's attorneys in that particular case, which is already hitting some headwinds anyway?
Yeah, it's interesting. The 4 criminal cases, they're each similar but so different in their own way. Right now, the Georgia case is currently on hold while they decide if the prosecutor, Fani Willis, needs to be disqualified. But even when that decision comes, assuming she's allowed to remain on the case, that case is going to remain in limbo while Trump is in office. He's not going to face a state prosecution while he is the leader of the free world. So the future of that case is very uncertain.
Paula Reed, thank you for wrapping all that up. Lots of cases, lots to talk about. We will see what happens. Appreciate you. Kate?
Questions swirling about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and what role he's going to play in the next Trump administration. We know the president-elect has told Kennedy to, quote, go wild on America's public health agencies. He's a well-known vaccine skeptic. He's been a dominant force in spreading conspiracy theories about vaccines for years, leaving people who work in public health searching and worrying what that means for the future of public health. Here's what RFK Jr. said after Trump's victory.
I'm not going to take away anybody's vaccines. I've never been anti-vaccine. I'm going to make sure the scientific safety studies and efficacies are out there and people can make individual assessments about whether that product is going to be good for them.
CNN's Meg Terrell is here with much more on this. Meg, scientific safety studies. What is he talking about? And remind folks about how they are currently already available.
Yeah, Kay, I mean, I think that's a big question a lot of people have. What data is he referring to that is not already out there in the public domain? Because so much of it gets out there. We saw this during COVID, as there was an incredibly expedited vaccine development process under Operation Warp Speed. That was one of the chief accomplishments, a lot of folks said, of the Trump administration. Typically, this process takes years and years. You first go through animal studies before vaccines go into human clinical trials that involve thousands of patients and take years. Finally, when you get to the large phase 3 studies, if those are positive enough on safety and efficacy, then a company will apply to the FDA for approval. That review process sometimes usually involves outside advisors as well, where all the documents are posted. You see hundreds of pages of data from both the manufacturers and also the FDA reviewers' own review of that data. Sometimes they disagree with what the companies have put forward or how they've interpreted some of the results. So that's all often very public. You can watch some of those discussions, those day-long meetings of the outside advisors. The FDA then makes its decision. Then it goes to the outside advisors to the CDC, who have these big public meetings. You see their data and how they're looking at all of it. If the CDC director takes that recommendation about how the vaccines should be used, how often they should be taken, for whom, then the vaccines get added to schedules. The monitoring doesn't stop there, though. There are many systems in place, both at the FDA and the CDC, to monitor vaccine safety as they are out there in the world. And so these things are continuously monitored for their safety and their efficacy to make sure that they're serving the population in a way that everybody expects them to.
Exactly. So what are you then hearing from people in public health about the possibility of RFK taking on such a big role?
Yeah, talking with people, they're not necessarily thinking that RFK Jr. is going to go in there and take one of these public health leadership roles and really disrupt things in terms of the way they work. What they're chiefly concerned about is that he will continue to chip away at confidence in vaccines to a degree that could mean we see diseases coming back that we thought we'd put behind us, polio and measles, for example. And if you look at kindergarten vaccination rates, for example, for the MMR vaccine, that's measles, mumps, and rubella, already they have been ticking down nationally from that 95% level that the CDC says we need to get to achieve herd immunity for measles, for example. Now they're down to 92.7%. So that is the main concern, that this confidence in our public health system will continue to be eroded.
Meg, thank you. Sarah?
All right. Thank you, Kate. It's going to be a hectic few weeks as the president-elect team gets ready for Inauguration Day. The key dates on the calendar you need to know about. And wildfires are exploding in California as we speak. Now 27 million people are facing life-threatening conditions today.
"74 days, Donald Trump will be inaugurated once again, this time as the 47th president of the United States. And what happens between now and then is quite a lot. A new Congress convenes, the federal government needs funded, and the president-elect may or may not face sentencing. CNN's Zachary Wolf has a new analysis kind of putting it all together. So, Zach, how does Donald Trump plan to navigate everything on that schedule while putting together this next administration?
Yeah, I mean, well, at first he really needs to focus on putting together that new administration, but it's going to be a busy 2 months outside of that transition process because, as you said, it's possible that he could be sentenced. He's a convicted felon. He faces sentencing. That's the first date on the calendar. Everybody needs to remember November 26th. It's possible that could get waived or changed. So, things could change. One thing that's not going to change is that the electoral process, the electoral college process, remember, voters pick electors rather than a president. It's these electors who are tied to the campaigns. We will find out officially who they are on December 11th. And then on December 17th, they're going to meet in state capitals to officially select Donald Trump as president. This is going to be a way less dramatic process than it was 4 years ago because Kamala Harris has done something Donald Trump never did, which is concede that she lost the race. There are no alternate slates of fake electors, so that will happen, and hopefully it will be hitch-free. What could be complicated is that on December 20th, the current Congress, the people who are currently in office, have to find a way to fund the government. This is something Republicans and Democrats disagree on. They are in a lame duck session at this point, but they still have to figure out how to do that, push it into next year, and then next year, on January 3rd, we will appoint a new Congress. Those people, as a result of the election, will take the oath of office. 3 days later, they count the electoral votes. Kamala Harris will face the indignity of overseeing her own election defeat, something no vice president since Al Gore has done. And then on January 20th, of course, is the inauguration. There's going to be a lot more that happens in between those dates, but those are things to put on your calendar, all things to keep track of.
So a lot has been decided, obviously, with Election Day and the path forward. One thing that still is lingering out there is is a balance of power in Congress and where things stand with the House of Representatives, Zach.
This is going to be something everybody needs to pay attention to because President Trump's power will be greatly increased if he has, the Senate, the House, and the White House. But there's a lot of House races that are undecided. Republicans lead in some key ones, but we still don't know who's going to be in control of the House and who's going to be the House Speaker. And that's going to be a really important question to keep track of in the coming weeks.
All right, so you want Sarah's on one.
Zach Wolf, thank you so much, Zach.
All right, on our radar for you, utility officials cutting off power to nearly 70,000 people amid the fast-moving mountain fire in Southern California, which has now burned more than 14,000 acres. Look at those pictures. They want to prevent fallen power lines from spreading flames. A red flag warning for dangerous and life-threatening fire conditions is in effect for 27 million people there and in the San Francisco Bay Area. And want to help your brain age slower? Listen up. Researchers say exercise, avoiding tobacco, speaking a second language, or even playing a musical instrument can all factor into how your brain ages later in life. Now, those factors could be responsible for up to a 20% difference in cognitive decline from the age of 70 to 82. Oh, and let's not leave out one of the biggest things here, for us anyway. Poor sleep can be a factor that could help age your brain, so try to get some good sleep. The Australian breakdancer known as Ray Gunn, who went viral, as you will all remember, during the Paris Olympics, is retiring from competitive breakdancing. She says it's all because of the backlash she faced online over her Olympic performance. The 37-year-old was mocked online for her, putting it kindly, unorthodox version of breaking, for which she also lost 3 of her round-robin battles. Rachel Gunn says she continues to break dance, however, and she doesn't care about the haters, but she's not doing it competitively.
Understand that.
Yep.
Understand that. Thank you so much for joining us. This is CNN News Central. CNN Newsroom, up now.
All right, happening soon. President Biden will address the nation following Donald Trump's victory. What we are learning about Biden's message as the Democratic Party tries to figure out what went wrong. Plus, preparations are ramping up for Trump's promised mass deportation of migrants as his allies are now jockeying for cabinet positions. New CNN reporting coming to you on the behind-the-scenes strategy of the Trump transition. Good morning. You are live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Jim Acosta in Washington. All right, let's begin over at the White House. It's going to be a busy day over there. CNN's Arlette Saenz joins us live. Arlette, in the next hour, we expect the president to address the nation on Trump's election victory. What do we expect the president to say?
Well, Jim, this will be the first time President Biden is speaking publicly since voters decided to send Donald Trump back to the White House next year. The president is expected to offer some reflections on the results of the election and talk about the way that the country needs to come together to move forward. The president also is expected to talk about the transition process. Aides have insisted that Biden remains committed to ensuring that there is a peaceful transfer of power, because that is something that Trump did not afford to Biden back in 2020, when he had thrown up many roadblocks in the transition process and did not concede the race to the president. Now, Biden yesterday did speak by phone to congratulate Trump and invite him here to the White House, and sources say that meeting could potentially happen as early as next week. Now, Biden yesterday in a statement, he praised Vice President Kamala Harris, saying that she ran a historic campaign under extraordinary circumstances, and in a call last night also said that she was the best vice president that he could have asked for. But there will be a lot of questions going into the speech about whether President will address what exactly went wrong for Democrats. In the last 48 hours, there has been a lot of soul searching, a lot of questioning about the messaging and strategy in this race, and many Democrats are pointing the blame directly at President Biden. Many frustrated with the fact that he decided to pursue a re-election bid at the age of 80, and then once he did drop out, that it left very little time to mount a campaign against Trump. So these are all questions facing Biden in this moment. But it is clear that the loss of this race to Trump could very well impact the president's legacy. There is also, Trump has said that he wants to undo some key initiatives from Biden's time in office. And Biden is now facing this new reality where his predecessor, the man that he once beat in 2020, will be returning to the White House next year. These remarks today hoping to provide the country with some advice on the way forward following these election results.
All right, Arlette Saenz, thank you very much. We're hearing that the president-elect could start announcing picks for top posts in his administration within days. CNN's Elena Trina is in West Palm Beach, Florida, tracking that. Elena, what names are you hearing?
Well, there are a lot of names being thrown around right now, Jim, as you can imagine. I mean, really, even in just the hours before Donald Trump was officially announced that he had won the election, the jockeying had begun and really begun to intensify, with people trying to throw their names out to top people within Donald Trump's inner orbit to Trump himself, and really try to pitch themselves and their loyalty to him. Of course, we know loyalty is one of the things that he values most, particularly in an administration where he wants to surround himself with people who will not hold him back. Now, there are two positions I want to say that I think Donald Trump cares about the most, that are the most important for us to focus on. The first is Attorney General. We know Donald Trump has massive plans for the Department of Justice, and also that in the past, in the closing days when he was leaving the White House back in 2021, he had said privately that one of the biggest regrets of his time in office was who he had selected for Attorney General, specifically looking back on Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr. So this is going to be a very big role for Donald Trump. Some of the names that we have heard include Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General, who, like Donald Trump, had faced an impeachment. We've also heard Matt Whitaker, who we know had served in an acting Attorney General role back in his first administration. Senator Mike Lee of Utah, someone who's been very loyal to Donald Trump, a big ally of his in Congress. And then also one name we've heard of, John Ratcliffe, his former Director of National Intelligence as well. But one name that we've heard has been pitched to Donald Trump directly is Mark Paoletta. He had served also in the first administration, someone who has remained close to Donald Trump, has a lot of, a big legal background, I should say. So those are just some of the names under consideration. But again, a big deal given how important the Attorney General role is to Donald Trump. Also, I think Chief of Staff, who is going to be the one in the White House with him day in and day out, helping kind of run what is happening both in the Oval Office and throughout the administration. We know that Susie Wiles, his campaign manager, is definitely someone who has been floated. I will say, though, however, Jim, that I've heard many people believe she may be better in a different type of role, a bit of a more outsider role, someone like a counselor or a senior advisor. They have compared that to what we saw with Kellyanne Conway, his former 2016 campaign manager, and what she did in the Trump White House. Other names we've heard are Russ Vought, who has been running a policy think tank really in D.C., has been very close with Donald Trump and helping him prepare, or really, anyone, but really, I should say, the Trump administration prepare for if he were to win. We've also heard Brooke Rollins, who ran the America First Policy Institute, Bob Lighthizer, his former trade representative. So a lot of names being batted around. I will say it is still early, particularly because we know that Donald Trump was really not entertaining serious conversations about who he would pick for his cabinet or for other administrative posts. He thought, he's superstitious. He didn't want to get ahead of himself. But they are very much working on this now, and also, I've heard, have begun the vetting process for some of these people. Jim?
Yeah, Elena Trine, I mean, the selection of Russ Vought for Chief of Staff would be very interesting, obviously. I mean, he was one of the co-authors of Project 2025, so that would obviously send a signal that Donald Trump was very much into Project 2025, even though he said he wasn't during the campaign. Elena Trine, thank you very much. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Richie Torres of New York. CNN's been projecting he is going to be reelected in his New York City district. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. President Biden is scheduled to speak during the next hour. What do you want to hear?
I'm hoping that the president can just give us hope, because it's going to be utterly despairing and depressing to live through the psychodrama of Donald Trump, of a second Trump presidency. And I worry that Donald Trump is more emboldened than he's ever been, and that a second Trump presidency is likely to be more vindictive than the first. And one of the fundamental differences between his first presidency and his subsequent presidency is the fact that he now enjoys absolute immunity. And he seems to be intent on exacting revenge against his political enemies.
And to that point, I mean, just a few moments ago, Elena Trine was laying out who might serve in a Trump administration once he gets back into office. And one of those names she mentioned was Russ Vought, who worked at the OMB under Donald Trump in the first administration. He was a co-author of Project 2025. Donald Trump out on the campaign trail, he attempted to distance himself from Project 2025. But if Russ Vought becomes the White House Chief of Staff, what do you think that means? Because, I mean, as you know, Project 2025 laid out a lot of ambitious goals for a Trump administration, one of them being cleaning out the bureaucracy, the government bureaucracy here in Washington, and filling them with Trump loyalists.
Look, we know that Donald Trump has nothing but contempt for the norms of liberal democracy. We all saw him inspire an insurrection against the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. And I often ask myself, what if Donald Trump had a vice president who was willing to block or delay the certification of the Electoral College? What if he had a attorney general who was willing to open sham investigations into false claims of election fraud? So I worry that he's going to appoint people who are willing to do his worst bidding and who are willing to enforce his worst instincts, which would be even worse than what we saw in his first presidency.
And Congressman, what do you make of Vice President Harris giving that concession speech yesterday at Howard University here in Washington? She conceded the election. When Donald Trump lost in 2020 to Joe Biden, he did not concede the election. He still has not conceded the election. What do you make of that?
For our country and full of resolve.
I mean, Vice President Harris did the right thing. And there's one party in America that accepts the results of an election and that is committed to facilitating the peaceful transfer of power. And it's the Democratic Party. And that's one of the fundamental differences between the Democrats and the Republican Party, particularly under Donald Trump. And we saw that with the gracious concession speech from Vice President Harris.
And Congressman, I want to share a social media post you placed on X, Elon Musk's social media platform. You said this, quote, Donald Trump has no greater friend than the far left, which has managed to alienate historic numbers of Latinos, blacks, Asians, and Jews from the Democratic Party, end quote. What did you mean by that?
Well, I have a concern that the far left is pressuring the party to take policy positions that are deeply unpopular among most Americans. One example is defund the police. Keep in mind that Donald Trump's gains among Latinos long predates the 2024 election. He made gains among Latinos in places like the Bronx back in 2020 during the public backlash against defund the police, and he built on those gains decisively in the 2024 election. If you were speaking to the far left, then you could be forgiven for thinking that defund the police is a popular movement in America. But if you're speaking to working class people of color, then you would realize that there was never a mass constituency for a movement like defund the police. And so we should be taking positions that are in line with the majority of Americans. Now, I want to be crystal clear. The majority of Democrats never endorsed a movement like defund the police.
Yeah, I was going to say, wasn't that largely kind of abandoned by the Democratic Party? I mean, I wonder if that's maybe an unfair criticism on your part, Congressman.
I don't think so, because the far left has a outsized microphone and therefore has an outsized impact in shaping the perception of the Democratic Party. And look, the election cycle was not completely depressing. There was a ray of light in New York, right? We saw an impressive transformation of the Democratic Party in New York State under the leadership of Hakeem Jeffries. We saw victories from candidates like Laura Gillen, Tom Suozzi, Josh Riley, Pat Ryan. And the common thread among all of them is all of them are left of center Democrats. Like the center left is capable of winning the swing districts that we need to win to make Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker of the House.
All right, Congressman Richie Torres of New York, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
Coming up, building Latino support really paid off for the Trump campaign, especially among men. I'll continue the conversation on this seismic shift with this very important voting bloc that's coming up after the break. Stay with us. Latino men went big for Donald Trump this election. Latino women still favored Kamala Harris, but by smaller margins than they supported Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. Here's what we heard from voters in the battleground states of North Carolina and Pennsylvania after they learned Trump was headed back to the White House.
It affects me because I'm Latino. You know how the relationship between Trump and Latinos is. That's him against. The pro is that he's already been president. He already knows how to run a country. It's fine, I agree. I'm not entirely against it.
We have to see how this man is going to come. If what he promises, which was the first thing he said in the early morning, the first thing he's going to do is fulfill his promises of government. And as a Latino, you feel a certain disdain for what his colleagues in Puerto Rico said and how he contemptuously speaks of Latinos. At the last minute, he wanted to look for them, but this has surprised me a lot.
All right, let's bring in a panel to talk about this. CNN contributor and New York Times journalist Lulu Garcia-Navarro, Vice Chair of the Republican National Hispanic Assembly, Luis Figueroa, and Domingo Garcia from the Political Action Committee for LULAC. Domingo, you and I talked about some of this before the election. Let's dig into this now. I mean, your organization endorsed Kamala Harris after your organization really had not endorsed anybody in its history. What are you hearing from Latinos and in particular Latino men as to why the election went down the way it did?
I think a lot of Latino men, especially here, I'm in Texas, but across other states like Arizona and Nevada, were concerned that the Democratic Party had drifted too far to the left on cultural issues, specifically abortion, LGBT, and energy issues. And they thought that President Trump would do a better job on those issues and align better with them on those issues. And so, to a certain extent, I think Latino men felt excluded by the Democratic Party and by the Kamala Harris campaign. I don't think that's a fact, but I think that's the message that was out there, and that's why Trump was so successful in getting the Latino vote.
Yeah, Luis, what do you think? You're a Trump supporter. What happened?
So, starting by calling half of the country garbage, or by saying that Trump was not surrounded by strong, independent women, I think that resonates with the Latino community, especially here in Florida. What I have seen in Osceola County, 65% plus Puerto Rican Latino community, they went out and voted for Donald Trump because they could not afford groceries, they could not afford to buy a house, and those policies resonate with the Latino communities, like with all of the Americans, actually.
Yeah, Lulu, Luis brings up a good point, and it's something that I heard when I was out in Nevada talking to voters, is that, people were really feeling it in this economy. Inflation just got ingrained, frustrations with inflation. And Latinos are going to vote based on their economic concerns, just like just about any other demographic out there. What's your sense of it?
Well, Latinos are going to vote that way, but even more so because, first of all, it's a young population, average voting age 27 years old. Second of all, lower medium income, so they work in industries that were really impacted by inflation. But I want to just bring up two places where the Democrats actually lost big. That is in Starr County and in Miami-Dade County.
Starr County, Texas.
Starr County, Texas, which is right on the border, and Miami-Dade County, which is in Florida. Both Democratic strongholds flipped for the first time in a very long time. Starr County for the first time ever. What does that tell you? Those are very different Latino populations. That is Mexican-American on the border, and in Miami, Cuban-American, Venezuelan-American, Colombians, etc. What do these two groups have in common? They have in common the economy. That was a big thing. Also, to what the president of LULAC was saying, they do feel that the party has gone too far left. But the other thing, and if you look in Starr County, specifically immigration, that is a place I've been there many times. That is on the front line of the border issue. That is a place where a lot of the Latinos work in law enforcement to do with border issues. And so the border issue, even though it wasn't a top issue for Latinos, which it goes against what most people think, it was an issue for them.
Yeah, Domingo, I do want to ask you about this because we've learned that Homeland Security officials are bracing for a seismic shift in immigration policy once Trump takes office. He's vowed mass deportations. Let's just have a little plain talk here. A lot of folks are wondering, why would Latinos vote for Donald Trump if that means he might deport abuela? He might deport members of their household. As you know, lots of Latino families in this country are of mixed status. And, a lot of folks are asking on the Democratic side, why would they do this to themselves?
I think there's a disconnect, especially among first, second, and third generation Latinos, that we're U.S. citizens. Nobody's going to deport us. It's those Venezolanos or Cubanos or Bolivianos who just crossed the border last month, but they got a free hotel and a free Walmart card or whatever. The rumors are out there. Now, a lot of that's false, but that's the perception. And so they think that closing the border, like she mentioned about Starr County, a lot of people work there in the energy sector, and they work for ICE. 80% of the law enforcement on the border patrol, those are Latino families, and they depend on those jobs. So they see that is not affecting them, and that's why they actually did support closing the border. LULAC took a position 2 years ago that it was time to take a moratorium on the asylum claims because there were too many people crossing the border. There was a humanitarian crisis in Eagle Pass, Texas, and in El Paso that we were seeing just thousands of families there, and it was just not tenable. And I think the Democrats lost that, and President Biden
and the president just waited too long on that, Domingo? The president just waited too long?
He waited way too long on that. And then Trump just pounced on it and pounded on it and used Latino immigrants as political piñatas, and he got a lot of political candy in this election.
Luis, what are your thoughts on mass deportations? Do you want to see that happen? You're a Trump supporter. Donald Trump, people around him have talked about mass deportations on a scale that we have not seen since the 1950s when Dwight Eisenhower was president. He had a program at that time called, and I'm just saying this is the name of the program, I'm not using this term, but they called it Operation Wetback. And during that program, there were even some U.S. citizens who just looked Latino who were deported at that time. Do you want to see that happen?
I think, first of all, let me start by saying, in 2020, when this started to happen, President Joe Biden assigned Kamala Harris as the border czar. That's the first thing. She had 3 years.
Luis, I have to fact check you. She was not the border czar, but go ahead. I know what you're saying, but she was not made the border czar. I want to say we have to have the facts here, and that's factually inaccurate. But please go ahead.
There's a couple of tweets about it, but all right, no problem. So once she was in charge of that, or the vice president for the country, she could have solved the problem in 3 years. First 2 years, they had Congress, the Senate, and the presidency. They didn't solve the problem. So they want to use the issue as a political tool for the Americans to vote for them, and it backlash. Because now what we're seeing
Luis,
is...
my question was, if you don't mind, I'm sorry, and I don't mean to cut
ahead.
you off. I definitely want to have a civil discussion, but my question was whether you wanted to see mass deportations. Do you want to see mass deportations?
So the first thing that we need to do is close the border. More than 10 million people illegally entered the country. They have to be deportation. So there is no other way around. They have to be deportation. They have to be
deportation
we
camps.
have to respect the laws.
I'm
not saying deportation camps.
Do you want to see people in camps rounded up and put in camps?
No.
Isn't that what you voted for? Isn't that what you voted for?
They are in camps now. More than 300,000 children are missing. So they're in camps now.
Lulu, I mean, one of the things that I think we need to talk about is whether or not, folks just had the wool pulled over their eyes. And maybe they were voting on economic issues, but at the end of the day, maybe voting against their own self-interest. I mean, I had to press Luis there on this issue of mass deportations. I don't think a lot of Latinos in this country have really come to grips with what that might look like. We have not seen something like that happen in this country in a very long time.
Do you know what was really interesting to me? I interviewed J.D. Vance, who is now going to be the vice president of this country, and I was pressing him on the issue of immigration and talking about his comments about Springfield and the Haitians and how they were not here illegally. And he kept on using this word, I'm here for the citizens of this country. I'm here for the citizens of this country. And I think what Latinos hear, especially the ones that voted, is that they are citizens of this country, and that when President Trump is talking, he's not talking about them. And so it remains to be seen how effective this quote-unquote mass deportation is going to be. It's very difficult to deport the numbers of people that they are talking about. Very expensive, billions. I mean, deportations in previous eras have just not been able to capture all the people that that they say they are. So is it going to be effective? Can it actually happen? And then at the end of the day, this Trump administration will be judged by what it does.
Yeah.
And there'll be another election, and then people will have to decide.
Well, and we'll have to see what happens when the cameras are rolling. Because it's one thing to talk about mass deportations and hold up a sign at a political convention, but when the cameras are rolling and people are being rounded up en masse and put on buses or wherever and sent off to camps, obviously there could be a very different reaction in this country. Lulu Garcia-Navarro, Luis Figueroa, Domingo Garcia, thank you very much for your time this morning. We appreciate it. All right, taking a look at the Dow this morning as Wall Street looks to extend its post-election rally, where the markets stand now. That's next. In about 30 minutes, President Biden will be addressing the nation following Donald Trump's election victory. We will bring that to you live. In the meantime, the Dow is up just slightly after Trump's election victory. This comes after the stock market closed at record highs yesterday. CNN's Matt Egan joins us now. Matt, what do you make of these market reactions that we're seeing so far? I mean, yesterday, obviously, it took off like a rocket, but the market's trying to figure things out this morning. What do you think?
Yeah, Jim, markets are starting today pretty quietly, maybe a bit of a hangover after that big celebration on Wall Street yesterday. We saw the Dow spike 1,500 points yesterday, about 3.5%. Biggest one-day percentage increase in 2 years. Now, those gains were driven by relief, right? Investors are relieved that someone has emerged as the clear-cut winner here. Weeks of recounts and fights in court would have added so much uncertainty. So clarity is good for investors. There's also some excitement about the Trump agenda, in particular tax cuts. Those will boost corporate profits. Deregulation, that's why we saw big bank stocks and crypto basically go to the moon yesterday. For now, investors are kind of shrugging off the potentially inflationary elements of the Trump agenda, namely tariffs. Those are taxes on U.S. imports. Those would raise costs for companies and for consumers, and mass deportations, right? There's a risk that if you try to deport millions of undocumented workers, that could deprive some industries of workers and lift wages and prices. But for now, investors are pretty focused on the positives here, Jim.
Yeah, and Matt, this afternoon the Fed is expected to cut interest rates for the second time this year. I mean, it is interesting that this is going to take place when you said inflation may be back on the rise again. I suppose the Fed may have to revisit all of this depending on how things go. But how will this impact everybody?
Well, Jim, not much drama about what the Fed is going to do today. It looks like a slam dunk that the Fed's going to cut interest rates for the second meeting in a row. The market's pricing in about a 98% chance of a quarter-point cut today. That comes after that half-a-point cut back in September. Now, this should help borrowers because interest rates are still pretty high, right? We're still close to multi-decade highs. You can see starting to come down just a bit. So every cut should help everyone who is trying to pay off credit card debt, trying to finance the purchase of a car. Those who have home equity lines of credit would be helped as well. But what's interesting is the Fed has less control over longer-term rates, and those rates are what influence mortgages. And we've actually seen Treasury rates spike in recent weeks. Part of that has been driven by optimism about the economy, but part of it has also been driven by concern about how a Trump administration could add trillions of dollars to the deficit and to the national debt. And you can see the 30-year fixed rate mortgage has actually moved significantly higher since the Fed started cutting rates. So, Jim, the big question today for Jerome Powell is going to be, how does he think about tariffs and the potentially inflationary aspects of the Trump administration?
Yeah, a lot of folks out there were hoping that mortgage rates would keep going down. We're not seeing that thus far. Matt Egan, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
in the meantime, Special Counsel Jack Smith is in talks with Justice Department officials over how to wind down the 2 federal criminal cases against Donald Trump. The president-elect has become the first criminal defendant elected to the nation's highest office, first felon, and that has upended the host of legal challenges he's facing. CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig. Now, Ellie, I guess it was anticipated that if Donald Trump were to get back into the White House, that would crush these cases, and that appears to be what's taking place.
It is, Jim, and I want people to understand this is happening sort of on 2 levels. First of all, the blunt force instrument here is Donald Trump has announced that he will fire Jack Smith, quote, within 2 minutes of taking office. I think Jack Smith understands that. That's part of the reason he's having these conversations. But also, separate and apart from that, Jack Smith, under long-standing DOJ policy, goes back to Watergate, says, we at DOJ believe we cannot indict, try, or imprison the sitting president. Now, we've never had a situation, of course, before where somebody was already under indictment and then became the president, but that's about to happen. And seemingly, in reaction to that, that's another reason why Jack Smith is packing up his boxes and winding down his cases.
And Ellie, I mean, this is also on the horizon. Trump is scheduled to appear in a New York courtroom on November 26th to receive a sentence in his hush money trial. Is there any chance that this happens? I suppose this is all in Judge Merchan's hands at this point.
It absolutely is all in Judge Merchan's hands. I think it's going to be a 50-50 call whether it happens or not. As Paula Reed and others have reported, Trump's team is arguing that that sentencing should not go forward because Donald Trump is now the president-elect. If it does go forward, Jim, I think there's, again, a 50-50-ish chance that Judge Merchan will impose a prison sentence as opposed to a probation sentence. But even if the judge does hold this sentencing on November 26th, and even if the judge says, I hereby sentence you to X in prison, Donald Trump's not going to serve that time while he's in transition as he is now, or certainly while he's president. I think it's going to be just formal or ceremonial if it comes to that.
I'm sorry, Ellie, what does that mean? I mean, does that mean that he won't have to report to prison? That'll be delayed or postponed until after he leaves office the second time around? What does that mean?
Well, that's an interesting question. So the formal way that would happen, Jim, is something called bail pending appeal, which a lot of defendants get. Someone in Donald Trump's position would normally get it, meaning you don't have to actually go to prison or start serving your sentence until all your appeals are done. That's a year or two down the line. But I guess there's a good question you raised I hadn't really thought about. What happens on January 20th, 2029, when Donald Trump is finished with his second term, if he's sentenced to prison? Then I think you get into a question of, is it actually going to be enforced on I don't know, he'll be 82 years old at that point? Maybe. I guess theoretically it's possible, but that's way down the line.
And Ellie, let's talk about the Supreme Court. I mean, obviously that was on the ballot this time around. American voters decided that they're okay with Donald Trump having a second term and filling the Supreme Court with more conservative justices. What could the impact be?
This is reality, Jim. This is, I think, an undercovered story. Obviously, the White House changing hands, Congress may be changing hands, but the Supreme Court is at stake as well. We currently have a 6-3 Supreme Court. All 6 Republican nominees, conservatives, 3 of them already Trump nominees from the first term, and 3 liberals. A couple things could happen. First of all, we've seen a trend of certain justices timing their retirement so that they can be replaced by like-minded conservatives or Republicans who were much younger. We saw Justice Breyer retire and be replaced by Justice Jackson, who's way younger. We saw Justice Kennedy retire. He was replaced by Justice Kavanaugh, who was 25 years younger. So the 2 oldest justices right now are Justices Thomas and Alito. They're 76 and 74 years old. We could see one or both of them retire, replaced by a 48, 52-year-old conservative. And if someone should die, we hope not, then it may remain a 6-3 court, or it could even become a 7-2 Supreme Court. So I think Trump's second term is going to further cement the conservative majority, probably for quite a long time.
All right, Ellie Honig, thanks for breaking all of that down for us. We appreciate it. All right, coming up, President-elect Trump says he will let Robert Kennedy Jr., quote, go wild on health. We'll talk about what that means next. Right now, you're looking at live pictures of the White House. Short time ago, I should say short time from now, President Biden will address the nation from there after his party's stinging defeat to Donald Trump. Let's discuss with CNN political commentator and Democratic strategist Maria Cardona and former spokesman for Republican Governor Doug Burgum's presidential campaign, Lance Trover. Maria, I'll start with you first. A lot of fingers being pointed at President Biden. Your thoughts?
You know, there is going to be a lot of recriminations. There is going to be a lot of finger pointing. You know, we got to give ourselves time for that to happen, to process exactly everything that happened that night, that happened throughout the process. But I think what you're going to see today is a very presidential, magnanimous Joe Biden, as we know he can be. It's one of his gifts. He's going to focus on the importance of democracy. He's going to focus on the importance of a peaceful transition. He's going to give huge kudos to the vice president, who did the impossible in an impossible amount of time. Obviously, it was not the result that many of us wanted, but he's very proud of how she ran this campaign. He's very proud of what the Democratic Party represented. And I think what you're also going to see is that by doing all of that, by having called Trump, by the vice president having called Trump, there's already a huge contrast between what they represent and what Trump represents in terms of the fact that he was not able to do that 4 years ago.
What about that? I mean, we've had 3 presidential elections since 2016. Hillary Clinton conceded, Kamala Harris conceded, Donald Trump did not concede. Is it time for the president-elect to concede the 2020 election?
The 2020 election is long gone. He is now the president-elect again, and I think any discussion of that, I think the country showed on Tuesday night they are ready to move forward, and they did it in a very overwhelming way. He has a mandate in this country. We have a United States Senate that's going to be 52, maybe 53 seats, and by and large, it looks like the Republicans are going to control Congress. So I think the country's ready to move forward from all this stuff of the past. They're clearly ready to move on from Joe Biden and looking forward to try to get inflation under control, get this border under control, all of the things Donald Trump ran on. I think that's what this country is looking for right now.
Do Republicans have more faith now in elections in this country? I mean, there was all this talk of voter fraud before Tuesday. I'm not hearing any of that talk now.
I've always had faith in elections.
Will Republicans give that up?
Personally, I've always had faith in elections. And look, I think this country is ready to move forward. And I always say, we talked about this prior to it, always got overshadowed is you guys always had thousands of lawyers on staff and zillions of dollars to spend in terms of like protecting the vote and protecting access to vote. But again, I think the country spoke very clearly on Tuesday night. They're ready to move forward and head us in a new direction.
And Maria, attention is turning now to who would serve in Trump's second administration. Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon recently sprung from prison as floating Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene for Homeland Security Secretary. Let's listen to that. Do we have that sound?
Is any truth to the rumor that you're going to take over as DHS?
I don't know what's going to happen, Steve. We're just thrilled to have President Trump back in the White House because everyone knows what that means. We're going to dismantle the deep state. We're going to end the weaponized government. We're going to pardon the J6ers.
You also have a potential candidate for Attorney General, Republican lawyer Mike Davis, tweeting that he wants to put this up on screen. Drag Democrats, quote, dead political bodies through the streets, burn them and throw them off the wall, legally, politically, and financially, of course, he says. Maria, what thoughts go through your mind when you see this kind of rhetoric being thrown around?
What a stand-up guy. You know, I hope his mom is proud. And this is exactly the challenge. You know, I will repeat what Vice President Harris said in her speech. She and all of us concede the election because we understand what a true democracy is all about. Hopefully Trump has learned that lesson, but I don't know. And hopefully Republicans will now shut the F up about voter fraud. But this actually is very concerning, because this is exactly what Democrats underscored was going to be the danger of another Trump presidency. You're right, Lance. He has a huge opportunity here to show that he can be above all of this BS and show Americans that he can defend our democracy, that he can be the president for everyone. We're going to be watching. I'm not convinced. I hope he proves me wrong, because the first thing that his press secretary tweeted was that on day one, he is going to implement mass deportation. Mass deportation means a huge bungling of the economy. It means families being separated. It means tragedy in communities across the country. So if that's what we're looking forward to, Democrats are going to be there every step of the way to defend the country.
I think, though, that is the central question for Democrats, though, after Tuesday night. And that would be my question is, are Democrats going to continue to be just the party of non-Trump, the never-Trump party? Because that did not seem to work out too well for them Tuesday night. And I'm not saying to be there to hold people accountable, but I think for some interest, there should be some
Mike Davis,
right.
We can put this back on screen.
100%, but that's not...
I do want to put this tweet back up on screen. He's been talked about as an attorney general. If we have it, it's the Mike Davis tweet. We just put it up on screen. Put it up again. That would be lovely. We can show it to our viewers one more time. Well, I'll read it to you. That he wants to drag Democrats, quote, dead political bodies through the streets, burn them, and throw them off the wall.
Yeah, completely unacceptable language.
Should that be the Attorney General of the United States?
It's completely unacceptable language, and look, that is not the type. I would say that is not the type of language you are hearing out of the president-elect's team right now. But that's what I'm also saying. The country spoke very fervently on Tuesday night about where they go, and I think
Trump said, "I will be your retribution."
Yeah, Donald Trump also said he was going to be a president for all Americans. He made it very clear on Tuesday. But that's my question for Democrats, though: is are they just going to continue to be the party of anti-Trump because that didn't turn out so well on Tuesday night?
But I'm sorry, Lance. Now that Donald Trump has won, it's on you guys. And I just said, let's give him a chance, right? I hope that he is able to be the president for everyone. So we are going to see what happens. It's on you guys now. Yeah. The ball is in your court. It's not let's see what Democrats do. No, I'm saying let's see what Donald Trump and Republicans do. Absolutely. And it depends on what you do. It depends on what choice you make, not you, Donald Trump and the Republicans around him, who he chooses for his cabinet is going to make all the difference in the world.
No question. And look, I think they've been very clear about where they're heading on this. But I don't know about this Mike Davis guy. I don't like that type of language. We talked about it a million times on the show. But that's not the language you're hearing out of the president-elect's team, and I don't think you're going to hear that.
And which is why I think it's important.
We did hear that kind of language from the president-elect. In the final days of this campaign, he was talking about guns trained on Liz Cheney's face.
No, sure.
He talked about shooting through the media. and so on. So, I mean, to say that, well, it's not coming out of the Trump team, we've seen this movie before. I covered Donald Trump when he was president. The buck stops with him.
Yeah, and I would go back to the vote. The voters made it very clear Tuesday night where they want this country to go.
That's right. But so now the vice president was right in saying we concede the election.
Sure.
He won.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we're not going to concede the fight if this is the type of person that he's going to put in his cabinet.
All right, guys, thanks very much. Appreciate it. We're going to keep this
Jim.
conversation going in just moments from now. President Biden will address the nation from the Rose Garden. We'll bring that to you live when it happens. Allies of President-elect Trump are now jockeying for key positions in his second administration, among them Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's promoted conspiracy theories and about vaccines. Kennedy was pressed on his vaccine stance and his potential role in Trump's next administration. Here's what he said.
If vaccines are working for somebody, I'm not going to take them away. People ought to have a choice, and that choice ought to be informed by the best information. So I'm going to make sure the scientific safety studies and efficacies are out there, and people can make individual assessments.
Would you eliminate any of the agencies?
To eliminate the agencies, as long as it requires congressional approval, I wouldn't be doing that. And I can get the corruption out of the agencies. This is what I've been doing for 40 years. I think Florida is on the way out because of that court decision. I think the faster that it goes out, the better. I'm not going to compel anybody to take it out, but I'm going to advise the water districts about their legal liability, their legal obligation to their service zones and to their constituents.
CNN medical correspondent Meg Terrell joins us now. Meg, what are the facts about how the U.S. makes sure that our vaccines are safe, and what might be the impact of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. being a health czar in this country?
Yeah, Jim, I mean, we saw all of this in public view during COVID. And of course, that process, Operation Warp Speed, was a tremendously sped up version of the vaccine process. And that speeding that up and getting a vaccine to people in the midst of this pandemic was one of the key, huge triumphs of the previous Trump administration. Typically, this is a process that takes place over years. So animal studies are done before a prospective vaccine can even get into human clinical trials. Those take thousands of patients and lots of years to complete. Once you get through phase 3, the companies submit those data to the FDA for review. And often that goes to an outside advisory group where we see these all-day public hearings where the data are all posted online, hundreds of pages, both from the manufacturers and from the FDA, which reviews the data, posts its own review. And you can see often the regulators might disagree with how the drug companies have presented some of the information or interpreted it. They make a recommendation. If the FDA then approves the vaccine, it then goes to an outside panel of advisors to the CDC. We've seen this as well. These are public hearings also. Those slides and data are posted online. Everybody can follow along. They make a recommendation for a vaccine to be added to a schedule. Who should get it? How frequently? The CDC director then can decide whether to accept that recommendation. And even then, vaccines are continuously monitored in the real world for how safe and effective they are, both by mechanisms through the CDC and the FDA. So, Jim, what I'm hearing from people in the public health world isn't necessarily that they're worried RFK Jr. is going to come in and uncover some data that are problematic or dismantle entire agencies. Really what they're worried about is that he'll continue to sort of try to chip away at confidence in vaccines. And we are already starting to see declining rates of vaccination. For example, the MMR vaccine, that's the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. Vaccination rates among kindergartners have been declining since before the pandemic. Now they're at about 92.7% nationally. The CDC wants to maintain an above 95% level to obtain herd immunity. That's when folks can protect people by getting vaccinated themselves. We are starting to see more outbreaks of measles, and there's a concern we're going to see measles come back more, things like polio. So that's the real concern, that there could be this kind of chipping away in vaccines, which over decades have been a pillar of public health.
Yeah, Megan, RFK Jr. is also talking about getting rid of fluoride in drinking water. What might be the impacts of that?
Well, a lot more tooth decay, I think. You know, we've seen when fluoride has been removed from certain municipalities' drinking water systems, there has been an increase in tooth decay and problems in those communities. You know, of course, at higher levels, we have been seeing data that there could be some safety concerns. So public health experts say this is an incredibly important contribution to public health, but obviously too much is not good.
All right, Meg Terrell, thank you very much. Thanks to everybody for joining me this morning. I want to bring in my friend and colleague Pamela Brown to talk about all of this. Pam, you and I covered the first Trump administration. Obviously, we're in for quite a ride here in the coming months. When Donald Trump comes into office and his team comes into office, they are certainly making it very clear that they're going to be bringing some very big changes to this country.
They certainly are. I've been talking to sources this morning who are helping with the Trump transition, Jim, and what I'm hearing from them is that there are some lessons learned from Trump's point of view from when he was in office the first time. One of them was he didn't like who he picked for attorney general. So now a key metric in terms of that role is loyalty. That's something that they're really looking at for the attorney general role and other roles within a second Trump administration. So, of course, we're going to be tracking this closely, and it's going to look different from what we saw the first time around, Jim. I know some people might think, well, he's been in office before. We kind of know what to expect. But this will be different, undoubtedly, and I know we're going to be covering it every step of the way.
Oh, yeah. No, I talked to a Trump advisor recently about all this, and they said that a second Trump term would be Trumpism on steroids. And so I fully expect that's what we're going to see. Pam, thanks so much. I'll hand it off to you now.
All right. Thanks so much, Jim. And of course, we were waiting to hear from President Biden to make his remarks following the election. Good morning, everyone. You are live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Pamela Brown in Washington. These are some live pictures now of the White House Rose Garden. Any minute, as I noted, President Biden will address the nation for the first time since his party's stinging defeat at the polls this week. Biden spoke with President-elect Donald Trump yesterday to congratulate him and invite him to the White House. The president's speech comes as Democrats grapple with the future of the party, and as many of Kamala Harris's allies place some of the blame on Biden for not dropping out sooner. Lots of finger pointing here this morning. As we await the president's speech, I'm joined by Arlette Saenz, Elena Treen, Jeff Zeleny, and David Chalian. Arlette, I spoke to a source this morning who tells me President Biden's message is going to be pretty straightforward. Tell us more about what we're expecting to hear.
Well, Pam, this will be the first time President Biden is speaking publicly since voters decided to send Donald Trump back to the White House. He is expected to reflect on the election results and talk about the country coming together in this moment. But President Biden also will be talking about the transition. Advisors to Biden have insisted that he wants to ensure that there is a peaceful transfer of power. That is something that was not afforded to Biden back in 2020 when Trump had put up roadblocks through the transition process and did not concede this election. So President Biden yesterday did place that phone call to President-elect Trump to congratulate him and invite him here to the White House. Sources say that that meeting could potentially happen as early as next week. But one big question facing President Biden heading into this speech is whether he will address what went wrong for Democrats in this election. There's been a lot of soul searching within the Democratic Party over the last 48 hours, a lot of questions about messaging and strategy, and many Democrats are placing the blame directly at President Biden's feet, as some have expressed concern about the fact that he even decided to seek re-election at the beginning, and then when he did drop out of this race, left the Democratic nominee with little time to mount their campaign against Trump. So these are all key pieces of the arguments within the Democratic Party right now, and they very well could shape how Biden is remembered going forward. But today he is facing this new reality that the man that he had defeated in 2020 will be returning to the White House today, and we will hear directly, or next year, and today we will hear directly from President Biden about how he feels about these election results and how the country should proceed going forward.
All right, thanks so much. And I want to bring in more of our panelists right now. Jeff Zeleny, you've been covering this every step of the way as we await President Biden to speak. What more are you learning about how Democrats are grappling with these big questions, these heavy questions about moving forward amid this resounding election loss?
Look, I mean, as Arlette was talking about the soul searching, there's certainly finger pointing. I think you have to put those in a couple buckets. One, the mechanics of this election. Was enough done to sort of turn out the vote? If you look at the battleground states, actually the margin was pretty slim. But the perhaps bigger problem for the Democratic Party are in non-battleground states, like in New Jersey, like in Illinois, where places where Republicans made very, very big gains. And that has to do with the messaging, the brand of the party. So yes, there are a lot of conversations, but it starts right here with President Biden. There cannot be, this is a bit of a backward-looking, sort of an part of the autopsy, I think. But his decision to stay in the race, enabled by Democrats at all levels, up and down ballot from the House to the Senate, certainly in the White House, to say, no, he's just fine. He will be the candidate. That certainly led to a cascading series of events. So, as always happens in a defeat like this, so there will be a lot of finger pointing among the coalition. But I'm interested to what President Biden is going to say. I believe that there will be very little of this introspection or soul searching coming from him. I think he will talk about this is an institutional type of speech. He's standing in the Rose Garden here. He is very committed to the peaceful transfer of power. It's why he invited the former president. But when we take a stock of this, he ran for president to stop Trumpism, if you will. Now, as he begins to take his leave in 74 days or so, Donald Trump is coming back, and he is, it's more than just the Trump era. I mean, this is a monumental defeat for Biden in that respect.
It really is.
He also takes to this lectern in the Rose Garden today as the only person to have ever defeated Donald Trump. And so that, no doubt, is going to be in his head, as it has been for some time. We have no idea. All the evidence at the time suggested he didn't really have a path to defeat him if he had stayed the candidate. But we know from reporting that Joe Biden has often made the point to people around him that he is the only one that actually had defeated Donald Trump. And today, after these election results are in, he will still have that claim to a piece of his legacy.
Yeah, you have to wonder how much he's thinking about the fact that Harris lost 13.2 million, or had less votes, 13.2 million less votes than Biden. Go ahead.
We're still counting lots of votes to be counted in California.
So
there are going to be millions more votes that have not yet been counted, so that is not a final number.
That is not a final
but
number.
No doubt, Donald Trump is on track to win the popular vote, which he did not do either in his 2016 victory or obviously in his 2020 defeat.
And that is worth noting. And of course, we are still counting those votes. But I mean, it goes without saying, David, that this is not how President Biden wanted to leave the White House. This is not what he wanted his legacy to look like right now.
And this will be a core part of his legacy. There is no doubt. Barack Obama understood when he left the White House after 8 years, despite his resounding success to get there in 2008 and the re-election, he understood that Trump's defeat of Hillary Clinton was going to be part of his legacy, which is why you saw some of what you saw from Obama in the intervening years. This, too, will now be a big part of Joe Biden's legacy. As Jeff said, his decision to run for re-election, despite his age and the concerns voters clearly had about it, and do all systems go, rather than saying to his party, I'm going to pass the torch. I'm a one-term guy, and you guys have an open, engaged primary process to figure out the best path forward and have the whole party weigh in on that. He chose not to do that.
And he thought he would run for president in the first place in 2020. I mean, so it's actually even bigger than that.
But of course, he also, from what I'm reading from our reporting, feels a little bit like, well, if Hillary Clinton and Obama, hadn't kind of tried to push me to the side earlier, maybe this would have been different.
I mean, perhaps, but I think that we will see how introspective President Biden is here at this moment. But he owns a very large portion of this. The economy was a central driver of this election, and the decisions that he made certainly didn't entirely contribute to it. He inherited a pandemic. A post-pandemic economy. So every presidency, as David's making the point, it is so interesting when we just think in history. One presidency is inextricably linked to the next, but these certainly are.
Yeah, and I think that is the point. I mean, in large part, not one thing decides an election, but it was clear the voters made their voices heard here with their votes on the economy and on inflation, and that does go squarely.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We went into this election with a singular big question, and that was, can Kamala Harris jump the hurdle of 3/4 of the country saying it was on the wrong track, people expressing real pain about inflation, and the incumbent Democratic president she serves as vice president at historically low approval ratings for successful re-elections, for that party to get another vote of confidence from the American people? The answer on Tuesday was a resounding no. she is not able to jump that hurdle. That was too high of a hurdle. And it's not clear that any other Democrat could have done so. What is clear is the Democrats did not put forth a message that appealed to enough people in this election to counteract those environmental factors in the electorate.
Right. And you know, you could argue, well, I mean, you know, the price at the grocery store don't always fall on the president. There's lots of external factors and so forth. But the perception these Americans is that actually, no, this is the Biden administration. This is what we're seeing. I think also what I'm told is that, you know, he's going to focus a lot on the peaceful transfer of power, emphasizing that, clearly drawing a stark contrast with Trump from 2020, Jeff.
Sure. I mean, this did not happen. What we're about to see here in the Rose Garden and over the next coming weeks did not happen 4 years ago. Because at this moment, 4 years ago, when Donald Trump was defeated, he was contesting the election at every turn. So this is very important to President Biden, the peaceful transfer of power. The presidency is bigger than the man still in the Oval Office. So I think that his call with Donald Trump yesterday, was just signifying that you have to do those things, even when your party is defeated. I mean, there are many examples in history, obviously, when a president is defeated or when his party loses, where you still have to step up and do the presidential role of that. But I think this is so different in the sense that we are now beginning the very end of Joe Biden's leave from public life, which we thought initially was back in 2017 when President Obama at the time gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That seems like a very long time ago. However, I think just the introspection here, one person not in the Rose Garden, at least we believe, is Vice President Harris. She has nothing on her public schedule today. So how that relationship repairs. So that is what is so fascinating here, just at this moment in time of history. As far as we know, President Biden still has not spoken in an extensive way, if at all, with former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who played a huge role in sort of getting him off the stage. So that's why this is no ordinary speech from a president sort of taking his leave. So to David's point, yes, he is the only person to defeat Donald Trump, and that is front and center in his mind. And, Biden loyalists will say, well, perhaps he should have stayed on the ticket and won. I think that there's zero evidence. In fact, there's much evidence to the contrary that would have been an even bigger disaster for the party.
But I do think Jeff's point about the through line from Biden's stated rationale for running for the presidency in 2019 and 2020, and obviously ultimately successful effort, that battle for the soul of the nation, that is going to be his mission in the Rose Garden tonight. He sees this role of the commander-in-chief of the President of the United States speaking to a divided country in the immediate aftermath of the election to continue the work of fortifying the soul of the nation, to put on display the peaceful transfer of power that he was not afforded. It was ultimately peaceful, but it clearly was bumpy along the way, that he was not afforded from former President Trump. So the contrast with that will be clearly front and center today, but also Joe Biden's belief in that work of the need to fortify the soul of the nation. And this, he believes, is a critical component to that.
All right, stay with us. We're waiting for this. We're watching for President Biden to address the nation. We're going to bring it to you live right here on CNN. Stay with us. And welcome back. Any moment, President Biden will address the nation after Vice President Kamala Harris's defeat this week. We'll bring it to you live. But first, Latino men delivered big for Donald Trump this election cycle, favoring the president-elect by double digits. Latino women still favored Kamala Harris, but by smaller margins than they supported Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. One Democratic lawmaker called the loss of Latino voters, quote, nothing short of catastrophic for the party. Let's bring in Republican Congressman Carlos Jimenez of Florida. Congressman, thank you for coming on. You are on the House Homeland Security Committee. As you well know, Trump has made many promises for a second term, one of them being mass deportations once he is back in the White House. Realistically, how do you see that taking shape given the logistical and financial complexities at play with an operation like that?
I agree. It's going to be a very, very big task. And my hope is, and I expect, that we'll just simply follow the law. We'll probably have to hire many more additional hearing officers to give the folks that have come in under the Biden-Harris administration, the millions that have come in under the Biden administration, their hearing in court. I mean, look, what's supposed to happen at the border is if you come in seeking asylum, you're supposed to either be held in a third country or you're supposed to be held inside the United States. That didn't happen. And then you're supposed to get a hearing to determine whether your claim of asylum is actually valid. It turns out that about 80% of those claims are not valid, and those folks are deported back to their country. That's the way that it's supposed to happen. Everybody has due process here in the United States, and so I believe that that's the way it'll happen. It'll have more hearings, and it'll be done quicker. The people will get their hearing. Those that are found to have not a valid claim will be deported back to their country, and those that have a valid claim will be allowed to stay in the United States, because that's what the law says.
So let's look at this a little bit deeper, because as you well know, this election, if anything, shows that voters have not been happy with inflation. And economists say mass deportations could actually add to inflation and really hurt the economy, not to mention the cost here. The average cost of deporting just one person, and this is from 2016 from ICE, was $11,000, and you multiply that with what Trump is vowing to do. It's expensive. I know you are concerned about the deficit and, where is money going to come from? What do you say to that concern among economists about what this could do to the economy and to inflation?
We need to follow the law of the United States. And the fact that it's going to cost $11,000 to deport folks that probably should have never been allowed in is actually due to the malfeasance and the destructive policies of the previous administration. We just have to follow the law. If the current administration had just simply followed the law, we wouldn't be in this pickle. We wouldn't have millions and millions of immigrants that maybe did not really have a valid claim to enter the United States. You wouldn't have had that massing of people at the border, because as soon as the Biden-Harris administration took power, everybody knew, hey, come on in. They want open borders. You can get in. Under Trump, that didn't happen. And so this all falls at the feet of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And so, yeah, we just have to follow the law. That's really what the American people want. That's what Hispanics want. We just want you to follow the law.
What do you think should happen in a situation when deportations would separate kids from their parents? What do you think about that? Are you okay with separating families through these proposed deportations? Or do you think they should all be deported together? What do you think?
I'll tell you what I'm not okay with, okay? I'm not okay with the fact that we have 300,000 kids that we don't know where they are and who they're with or what they're doing. I'm certainly not okay with that, okay? And so, look, there's a law.
When you say that, what do you mean? I just want to understand what you mean by that.
That means that there are 300,000 kids that the Homeland Security can't tell you where they are. That's what I mean. And so we had at least 85,000, and that grew to 300,000. I think that's a much more serious problem than some hypothetical about separating families. Look, somebody born here in the United States, they have birthright citizenship, all right? And so they're going to stay here. We'll get to those issues as they come. But right now, my main concern is finding those 300,000 kids that nobody knows where they're at.
All right. And we're just checking on that number. I didn't have that number at the ready, but my producer is just double checking that. I do want to ask you, because Trump did get a ton more support among Latino voters, and I'm wondering why you think that is. I mean, as you know, a lot of his rhetoric on the campaign trail was demeaning and insulting illegal immigrants, right? Why do you think Latino men have really come to him in larger numbers this time around?
Look, President Trump was railing against and is against the criminals that were allowed to come into the United States through the immigrant criminals that are in the United States, one of them being the Tren de Aragua, which is actually here in Miami too, all right? And so we have a lot of criminals that were allowed to come into the United States that should not have been allowed to come into the United States. That's what he's really against. We understand, and I understand, that the majority of the people coming through the border are just seeking a better life here in the United States. I do. I understand that very well. I'm an immigrant myself. We believe in legal immigration. That's what Hispanics believe in. Like I believe most Americans believe in legal immigration. We don't believe in illegal immigration. And why are Hispanics going to the to the Republican Party? Well, because I think that I know that our values are more aligned with Hispanics than the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party is going way to the left, to the extreme left. Many of us came here fleeing communism, fleeing socialism, and we look at the Democrat Party getting closer and closer to socialism, and that's rejected. And so we're a party of faith, we're a party of family, we're a party of hard work. And Hispanic men and women are people of faith, people of hard work, people of family. And so though our values are aligning, and so when I look at it, it's simply that the Hispanics are coming home to their natural home, which is the Republican Party.
All right, and just to follow up on the 300,000, there is 300,000 missing. Let's see, it's a paperwork problem, I'm told, not necessarily translating into 300,000 missing children. But I do take your point that would be a concern if there are children that cannot be found and located clearly. Congressman Carlos Jimenez, thank you so much.
And
we are waiting. Yeah, thank you. We are waiting and watching for President Biden to address the nation. We're going to bring it to you live. Stay with us. President Biden speaking now at the White House.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. Please. Thank you. Good to see this cabinet and the staff together here. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's good to see you all. Particularly good to see my granddaughter sitting in the front row here. Hi, Finn. How are you, honey? For over 200 years, America has carried on the greatest experiment in self-government in the history of the world. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. We're the people. The people vote and choose their own leaders, and they do it peacefully. And we're in a democracy. The will of the people always prevails. Yesterday, I spoke with President-elect Trump to congratulate him on his victory. And I assured him that I'd direct my entire administration to work with his team to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition. That's what the American people deserve. Yesterday, I also spoke with Vice President Harris. She's been a partner and a public servant. She ran an inspiring campaign, and everyone got to see something that I learned early on to respect so much, her character. She has a backbone like a ramrod. She has great character, true character. She gave her whole heart and effort, and she and her entire team should be proud of the campaign they ran. You know, the struggle for the soul of America, since our very founding, has always been an ongoing debate and still vital today. I know for some people, it's a time for victory, to state the obvious. For others, it's a time of loss. Campaigns are contests of competing visions. The country chooses one or the other. We accept the choice the country made. I've said many times, you can't love your country only when you win. You can't love your neighbor only when you agree. Something I hope we can do, no matter who you voted for, is see each other not as adversaries, but as fellow Americans. Bring down the temperature. I also hope we can lay to rest the question about the integrity of the American electoral system. It is honest, it is fair, and it is transparent. And it can be trusted, win or lose. I also hope we can restore the respect for all our election workers who busted their necks and took risks at the outset. We should thank them. Thank them for staffing voting sites, counting the votes, protecting the very integrity of the election. Many of them are volunteers who do it simply out of love for their country. And as they did their duty as citizens, I will do my duty as president. I'll fulfill my oath, and I will honor the Constitution. On January 20th, we'll have a peaceful transfer of power here in America. To all our incredible staff, supporters, cabinet members, all the people who've been hanging out with me for the last 40 years, God love you, as my mother would say. Thank you so much. You put so much into the past 4 years. I know it's a difficult time. You're hurting. I hear you and I see you. But don't forget all that we accomplished. It's been a historic presidency. Not because I'm president, because what we've done, what you've done. A presidency for all Americans. Much of the work we've done is already being felt by the American people, but the vast majority of it will not be felt over the next 10 years. We have legislation we passed that's just only now just really kicking in. We're going to see over $1 trillion worth of infrastructure work done, changing people's lives in rural communities and communities that are in real difficulty, because it takes time to get it done. And so much more. It's going to take time, but it's there. The road ahead is clear, assuming we sustain it. There's so much we can get done and will get done based on the way the legislation was passed. And it's truly historic. You know, we're leaving behind the strongest economy in the world. I know people are still hurting, but things are changing rapidly. Together, we've changed America for the better. Now we have 74 days to finish the term, our term. Let's make every day count. That's the responsibility we have to the American people. Look, folks, you all know it in your lives. Setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable. Setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable. We all get knocked down. But the measure of our character, as my dad would say, is how quickly we get back up. Remember, a defeat does not mean we are defeated. We lost this battle. The America of your dreams is calling for you to get back up. That's the story of America for over 240 years and counting. It's a story for all of us, not just some of us. The American experiment endures. We're going to be okay, but we need to stay engaged. We need to keep going. And above all, we need to keep the faith. I'm so proud to have worked with all of you. I really mean it. I sincerely mean it. God bless you all. God bless America. And may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
President Biden making his first speech after the resounding presidential loss for Kamala Harris there at the White House, walking away now. There is so much to discuss, Evan Osnos, with this speech, a short speech, straightforward speech we just heard from President Biden, but there was so much with it, the heaviness of this speech for him, right?
Look, he knows this is the first words, in effect, of his own chance to put the brushstrokes on how history will remember him. And right now, it is a deeply damaged legacy. He knows that. In some ways, he will be credited as the person who drove Donald Trump from the White House the first time, but also paved the way for Donald Trump's return. I felt one of the most, and one of the things you heard in there was him voicing what has been his central mantra of his life and his career, of course, which is when you get knocked down, you get back up. That's his way of trying to inspire people to say, get back into it, don't give up on politics, on governance, on the idea of pulling this country together. It's a barbed idea now, because in some ways it was that image, that notion, that mantra to himself that inspired him to run in this campaign and to stay in it despite all of the headwinds and the criticism that he got, people who wanted him to leave early. So some will inevitably wonder whether that message of never relent, never lose faith in yourself, ultimately will be part of the reason why Americans will perhaps eventually come to see the positive sides of his legacy as much as the negatives, but it's going to take a while for them to get there.
Yeah, Kayla Tausche at the White House, he talked about what he said was the good from his administration, but now that good he discussed, and his view, could be unraveled, right, by a second Trump administration. Okay, we can't hear Kayla. I'm going to go to David on that question. And just the overarching theme here, from what we heard from President Biden, and just how significant it is that he's leaving the White House in this situation.
Yeah, one of the things that jumped out to me is that he repeated something he says all the time on the campaign trail when he was the candidate against Donald Trump. Basically, since he's been in office, one of his key criticisms of Trump and contrast with Trump was the line, "You can't love your country only when you win."
Mm-hmm.
He said that when he gave big speeches on the anniversary of January 6th. He would constantly sort of like taunt Trump as a reminder, you can't do that. Here, he used it as a proof point, because he's on the other side of the win here. His team lost, and lost badly this week, to Donald Trump. And his standing in the Rose Garden was to assert again, as a proof point, that he wasn't just saying that when he was on the victorious side, but here he is on the losing side and reasserting you can't just love your country only when you win. And that, I thought, was a really important thing to hear from him in this new perspective, but with the same goal of reminding that that's what he means about the struggle for the soul of the nation being ongoing work.
Yeah, sending the message. I said it then, and I really mean it now that I'm on the other side. To go back to you, Kayla Tausche, from the White House, he also talked about Kamala Harris, his vice president, and who just is facing this resounding loss against Donald Trump. He said she ran an inspiring campaign. She has great character, he says. Tell us more about the conversations they've had and what she's doing today.
Well, certainly that echoes the conversation that they had privately yesterday, a brief phone call that was cordial and congratulatory for the campaign that she ran during a very truncated period of time, the shortest campaign being stood up in history. Of course, it was unsuccessful. And Biden keeping it very brief, choosing instead to focus these remarks on the work of his administration, with many of his senior-most staff and nearly his entire cabinet here in the audience, giving him a standing ovation. The emotions here very raw, Pam. The mood is extremely emotional. Everyone here believes that his approval rating really belies the achievements of this administration. And that's part of the soul searching that's going on behind the scenes. And there are so many cruel ironies of this moment for President Joe Biden. He talked about the strength of the economy, but yet, as we know now from nearly every exit poll, that is not how American voters see it. And as David mentioned, he said the same line about you can't love your country only when you win, here from the Rose Garden, where he, when he was the Democratic candidate, did many of his own campaign events, instead using that line that he had previously delivered in Statuary Hall on the anniversary of January 6th, and Independence Hall, and in front of Union Station, to criticize Donald Trump, who he's now preparing to welcome back into office. The exact outcome that he and everyone sitting before him had worked so tirelessly to prevent. Now, of course, they're preparing for what many of them saw as a binary outcome, the outcome that they did not want to see. And while he's trying to rally the troops to continue the work for 74 days, there are real questions about what the Biden legacy tour will look like and what the legacy writ large will be. Pam?
As we've been talking about, lots of soul searching ahead for sure on that front. Julie Roginski, I want to go to you on this because, of course, he is making the speech at the White House against this backdrop of a lot of finger pointing right now in the Democratic Party. Some who are saying, look, had President Biden not announced, to try to get reelected, and we all know how that transpired later on, perhaps this wouldn't be the situation. And we'll never be able to know, right? What do you say to that?
I'm going to speak some hard truths to my friends in the Democratic Party. This is not Joe Biden's fault. It's not Kamala Harris's fault. It's not Barack Obama's fault. It is the fault of the Democratic Party in not knowing how to communicate effectively to voters. We are not the party of common sense, which is the message that voters sent to us. For a number of reasons. We don't know how to speak to voters. When we address Latino, and language has meaning. When we address Latino voters as Latinx, for instance, because that's the politically correct thing to do. It makes them think that we don't even live on the same planet as they do. When we are too afraid to say that, hey, college kids, if you're trashing a campus at Columbia University because you're unhappy about some sort of policy and you're taking over a university, and you're trashing it and preventing other students from learning, that is unacceptable. But we're so worried about alienating one or another cohort in our coalition that we don't know what to say when normal people look at that and say, wait a second, I send my kids to college so they can learn, not so that they can burn buildings and trash lawns, right? And so on and so forth. When we put pronouns after names and say she, her, as opposed to saying, you know what, if I call you by the wrong pronoun, call me out, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. But stop with the virtue signaling and just speak to people like they're normal. There's nothing I'm going to say to Michael that I'm not going to say to you, that I'm not going to say to somebody else. I speak the same language to everybody. But that's not what Democrats do. We constantly try to parse out different ways of speaking to different cohorts because our focus groups or our polling shows that so-and-so appeals to such and such. That's not how normal people think. It's not common sense. And we need to start being the party of common sense again. Joe Biden is not responsible for that. Neither is Kamala Harris. It is a problem that Democrats have had for years. I've been banging the drum on this for, I don't know how, probably 10 years, if not longer on this. We need to get back to being the party of common sense, that people look at us and say, we understand you. We appreciate what you say because you speak our language. And until we do that, we should stop blaming other people for our own mistakes.
Just to follow up with you, and sure, Michael, I'm going to get to you. What would you say to those who would argue, well, Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris, they were the messengers. They were the top of the ticket. They were responsible for trying to get to those voters and get through to them with the messaging you're talking about.
Listen, and again, I have a lot of friends who I'm going to criticize here, and I know them personally, so I apologize from a personal level. But when you're spending your time at the White House trying to have viral moments with Steve Doocy of Fox News, which nobody in the real world in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, or in Saginaw County, Michigan, knows or cares about. When you're trying to go viral on TikTok because you're somehow taking on and trying to humiliate an anchor at a cable news station, as opposed to looking into the camera and saying, this is what we have accomplished for you today in plain terms, right? You could look into the camera and say, thanks to our infrastructure bill, Route 212 in Bucks County, Pennsylvania will finally have that pothole filled in Regalsville that you've been complaining about. But that's not what they did. They try to have these weird viral moments constantly where they're trying to take on Doocy at Fox, and they think it's hilarious. Nobody knows or cares who Doocy is, and the people who do know him are not voting for us anyway. So the point is, there's a way to talk to people on their own terms about things that they care about. That is a messaging problem the White House has had since day one. I've complained about it since day one. I'm complaining about it now, not to Monday morning quarterback, not to be rude, not to make anybody feel bad, but to say going forward, because I agree with Joe Biden, that was one of the finest speeches I've ever heard anybody give just now. I agree with him. We need to pick ourselves up, look at what went wrong, and change it so we can win again. The first way to do that is to talk to people like they're normal human beings and make them think that we are the party of common sense, not people who are afraid of alienating somebody so that we don't have positions that are clear, concise, and accurate as to where they are.
I want to bring you in on this conversation, sure, Michael. I want to get your reaction to what we heard from Julie, but also the overall view of what we heard from President Biden, who clearly drew a stark contrast with former President Trump, now President-elect Trump, saying, look, we have to accept the choice this country made and that there will be a peaceful transfer of power on January 20th. Of course, that is not what the situation was when in 2020 with Trump. So what did you think about what we heard and the importance of what we heard from President Biden?
Look, I mean, no one likes to lose elections. I've worked on enough campaigns to understand what that feels like as a strategist, but also for millions of people out there who voted for the vice president because they believed in her, they believed in her policies. I get it, so I certainly don't want to gloat. It's just not a great feeling to lose. But the American people, at least the vast majority of them who voted, did give a mandate not only to the former president, now president-elect, but also to the Republican Party. The President Biden stated his presidency has been historic. He said they accomplished great things, changing lives in rural communities. Well, Donald Trump was able to improve his standing and performance overall in rural communities across the country. He talked about the economy being the strongest, although he did acknowledge that some people are still struggling. Well, economic dislocation is still a very real thing. It's why I would argue vast majority of people voted for Trump over the vice president. I think it's why Donald Trump was able to increase his margins with Latinos, specifically Latino men. And so I think the Democratic Party is going to have to do what the Republican Party did after Mitt Romney lost to former President Obama. They need to do an introspection, an autopsy report, to understand, to many of Julie's points, that I actually do agree with, how do you actually communicate to regular people? Not, well-educated individuals, everyday hard-working people, and understand their values, their plight, their concerns. I don't think the Democratic Party, at least in my opinion, and I'm a conservative, so maybe our viewers may say, well, Michael, you're a bit jaded or biased in your perspective here, and I certainly understand that. That's a fair point. But I think a lot of people believe that the Democratic Party of the past is no longer the Democratic Party of today. And as you think about that dislocation as it pertains to the economy, we could go all the way back to NAFTA with President Bill Clinton at the time and the outsourcing of manufacturing jobs, and how over the past 2.5 decades that's led to the economic environment that we're seeing today. And so people are wondering, particularly men who oftentimes work with their hands, who don't get college degrees, well, how am I supposed to survive in this continuously changing economy, one that relies more on information technology and less on skilled workers? I mean, you have to provide solutions to those workers. And I think Donald Trump, in a very unique way, and I know Democrats will criticize the depth or the nuance and specificity of some of his arguments, but to be able to provide a critique and recognition of that plight of many people is important. And I think that's why he ultimately won and Vice President Harris did not.
Final thoughts to you, David. I thought that was really thought-provoking, what we heard from both Julie and Michael.
Yeah, no, this is what happens after an election. You look at what occurred, what the people were saying, and the parties, especially the losing party, tries to adjust and figure out a new way forward. This is exactly how Bill Clinton came to prominence in the Democratic Party after 12 years of Republican dominance in Reagan-Bush. Found a different kind of path and appeal, and we'll see what comes out of the ashes here for Democrats going forward. I just want to say one other piece of Biden's remarks today that I think are worth highlighting. Given the lies about the 2020 election that Donald Trump spread for 4 years, Biden took this high-profile opportunity to tout the integrity of American elections, to thank the election workers for conducting this in a free and fair way. And of course, Donald Trump's on the winning side now, and we haven't heard one peep of concern about election integrity since he had this overwhelming victory. But I thought Biden clearly wanted to stress that, not to poke Donald Trump in the eye there, I think, but to actually help future election workers and secretaries of state and people who are fortifying our security around elections, that this worked, thank them for their work, and try to convey to the American people that the American system, as he said, the integrity of the American electoral system, honest, fair, transparent, and can be trusted, win or lose.
That's a really important point. David Chalian, thank you so much. We'll be right back. Well, we just heard from President Biden for the first time since Vice President Kamala Harris conceded the race. And as Democrats brace for a second Trump presidency, many are asking not only how this happened, but where the party goes from here. Joining us now is California Democrat Congressman Eric Swalwell. Congressman, thanks for your time. I first want to get your reaction to what we just heard from the president. Did you hear what you wanted to hear, what you feel like you needed to hear in this moment?
Well, we have work to do, and I'm going to do that work. I'm all in to do that work. Doesn't feel good to lose. We still have a shot at the House. It's either going to be a slim Democratic majority or a slim Republican majority. But right now, I have to go right back on the field because the next play is the selection of cabinet secretaries who will implement Trump's Project 2025. And then the play after that is going to be, making sure the government is funded and making sure that we don't give more tax cuts to billionaires. So I don't have the privilege or luxury of thinking about this too much because, these plays are going to come pretty fast and people need me and my colleagues to have our heads in the game.
And Trump, as you know, on the campaign trail tried to distance himself from Project 2025, but we will see in reality if there is any room between Project 2025 and his policies with his administration and who he puts in his cabinet. But I want to go back to your party and the questions you're asking yourself this morning about your party and its direction after this resounding presidential election loss. I don't know if you just heard the conversation I had with the Democratic strategist, Julie Roginski, but she said the party doesn't know how to communicate effectively to voters and how to just get through to the regular person out there in America who's not, inside the Beltway.
She's right. Look, I was raised as a blue-collar kid, son of a cop, a mom who worked a number of odd jobs. My brothers are cops. I was a prosecutor. And I know that people resent when you talk to them like you're trying to win a Harvard Law School moot court competition, as opposed to just, talking to somebody at a bar or at the bus stop. And I think we would be better served if we led with our personality rather than policy. And our personalities can reflect our values, our principles, what we care about. But too often we're just not plain spoken enough. And frankly, we're too nice and too modest, and we stand on virtue. And I think you look at a candidate like Ruben Gallego, who won in Arizona. Look, that guy went to rodeos. He went to soccer matches. He went to boxing matches. He went out to the tribes. He was himself. He was just Ruben, and it worked. And he beat Kerry Lake in a state that Donald Trump won. And I think that's a good model of how we can win.
You ran for president in 2020. Do you think the lack of a primary helped or hurt your party this time around?
Well, certainly Kamala Harris in just 100 days was trying to do something that no candidate has ever done. And she was pitch perfect in her execution. But by not having the ability of going through a primary and being battle tested, of course, that comes with risk. But as I said, I'm on the field now, and I'm not in the announcer's booth. I don't have the luxury of going back and looking at what should have been, could have been. A young girl in a state with a 6-week abortion ban is wondering what I'm going to do next. A Ukrainian soldier in the trenches, as their ally just abandoned them, is wondering what I'm going to do next. A student who's going to high school and is more vulnerable than ever to a mass shooter is wondering what I'm going to do next. So I'm going to put my helmet back on, get back on the field, and make sure I do all I can, to defend and protect what we all care about.
You mentioned Ukraine. You previously traveled to Kyiv to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He says he had a productive discussion yesterday with President-elect Trump, who, as you know, has previously threatened to cut aid to Ukraine in its war with Russia. What do you think a second Trump term will mean for Ukraine?
Trump is going to impose a near surrender on Ukraine, and our allies in Western Europe are very worried. I've received a number of text messages from leaders over in Europe, NATO leaders, asking, are we going to stay in NATO? Will we keep our commitment? Are they going to be on their own? And so they very much are worried. And so that is what, as I said, it comes back to us who are on the field in the House and the Senate. Will we just lay down for Trump to do this, or will we stand up for the value of freedom and what that means in Ukraine, and recognize that if Ukraine falls, that other parts of Europe could fall and America could also fall. So lots on the line right now, and people are going to be tested.
You mentioned the NATO, NATO's Secretary General, he was saying now he looks forward to sitting down with Trump. He praised Trump, actually, for pushing member states to invest more in the alliance during his first term, and he expects more of the same under another Trump administration. And he says that would be a good thing. Can you concede that that would be a good thing, as the NATO Secretary General seems to be saying here?
That is a good thing. And President Trump, just like President Obama and President Biden, are right to ask our allies to do more. And since the invasion of Russia, they have stepped up and are doing more. And I think Donald Trump needs to understand, though, that NATO is not an institution that people pay into. It's what each government does on their own. And by just beating them up and not understanding how it works, that's disrespectful to them. I am rooting for America to succeed. I am not against the former president. I am for our country.
I think we're all rooting for America to succeed, no matter where you are in the political spectrum. Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining me. I'm Pamela Brown. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and X at Pamela Brown CNN. Stay with us. Inside Politics with Dana Bash starts after a short break.
Today on Inside Politics, the dawn of a new era. Former President Trump is now President-elect Trump, and he's headed back to the White House with a mandate to carry out an expansive agenda, one well beyond the economic issues that swayed many Americans to vote GOP. We have new reporting on who may be going with him and what they're planning for day one. Plus, you can't love your country only when you win. President Biden just restated that message to the nation in the White House after Donald Trump's resounding victory over his own vice president. And the blame game, Democrats are in deep despair, and they begin their long and arduous journey of examining how their coalition crumbled. I'm Dana Bash. Let's go behind the headlines and inside politics. We start with the seismic shift coming to Washington. In 74 days, Donald Trump will retake the reins of this country with a Republican-controlled Senate and potentially entire GOP legislative branch, at least run by the GOP. First, the question is, what is the Trump team going to do when it comes to who they're going to hire? And we're talking about 4,000 government positions. Right now, the president-elect is clearly focused on his top roles in the new administration. Sources say those could be announced in a matter of days. And one of the top qualifications needed for those jobs is classic for Donald Trump: loyalty. CNN's Kristen Holmes is in West Palm Beach, where she's been working all of her sources in Trump world. Kristen.
Yeah, Dan, I mean, one of the things we're keeping close eye on is who is going to be that attorney general. Now, obviously, we want to know who's going to be across the cabinet, but there is a particular focus on attorney general when it comes to Donald Trump because of a lot of the promises that the former president has made, one of which being that they don't want to have a sort of separation between the Department of Justice and the executive branch as a whole. Donald Trump wants to have a full control over the Department of Justice, something that we have been saying for the last year would be part of his plan once he gets to office. And that means having an attorney general who is incredibly loyal to the former president. Also, let's talk about those federal cases. He's going to want to have them immediately dismissed. He's also said he wants to make sure that Jack Smith can be fired as early as day one. That he's going to need a strong attorney general who's going to enact what Donald Trump wants on day one. So here's some of the names that are being floated. I want to be very clear. There's a lot of names being floated. Right now, Donald Trump is having a lot of conversations. The transition team is having a lot of conversations. But some of the names we've heard: Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, Matt Whitaker, who served as the acting AG after he fired Jeff Sessions, Mike Lee, the senator from Utah. There's John Radcliffe, who served as the former director of national intelligence. There's also two names that we don't have on our list: Mike Davis and Mark Paletta. These are both two conservative attorneys who have done a lot for Donald Trump in the last several years, particularly Mike Davis. If you look at him, he has been on television nonstop, really pushing a lot of Donald Trump's legal ideas, going up around his legal issue and defending the former president. We know that being on television is something that Donald Trump monitors and monitors very closely. Now, of course, the other key position to keep in mind here is chief of staff. Who is going to be Donald Trump's number two? Now, right now, we are told that front runner is Susie Wiles, who helped run Donald Trump's campaign and really helmed his win getting back into the White House. He feels comfortable around her. He feels as though she is somebody who protects him and is loyal to him. And a reminder of something that you just said. When Donald Trump left Washington in 2021, he left in disgrace. It was after January 6th. It was after he had lost the election. It was after he had lied about the election and fraud that we had seen, and not actually seen, but that he had said that we had seen. And most Republicans distanced themselves from the former president. Susie Wiles was somebody who was by his side. I saw her by his side when he announced in 2022, when he sat through the election results in 2022. She has been with him every step of the way, regardless of how we know he can be, and we know from reporting that we've done how he has talked to her in the past and the kind of contentious relationship. She really tried to keep him in line to get him back into the White House. So I am told that she is the front runner for that job. There's obviously a few other people in consideration, but it's going to be interesting to see if she wants it and how this actually plays out.
Kristen, thank you so much for your reporting today and throughout this whole campaign. And I'm sure we'll be thanking you every day for what we're about to experience. Appreciate it. Joining me now are some of the best reporters in the business. CNN's Manu Raju, Laura Barone-Lopez of PBS NewsHour, CNN's Jeff Zeleny, and CNN's John King. So here we are, first Inside Politics after the election. I want to pick up where Kristen left off, which is, I think we should also say that, like, we're going to be trying to absorb the equivalent of water coming from a fire hose pretty much every day. So maybe the best way to digest it all is to take it with bite-sized pieces. Let's start with John, where she talked about the Attorney General. Chief of Staff also, but Attorney General, because I don't think that there is a position in the future Trump cabinet that is more consequential for how he intends to, very open about how he intends to use the government, use the Justice Department for his own, I wouldn't say benefit, but the separation right now that Joe Biden put in, which is the traditional way to do it, is going to be blown right open.
Yes. Look, we should start with the assumption that there are few, if any, guardrails around the new Trump presidency. The Supreme Court has said presidents have pretty much blanket immunity. The Constitution doesn't say the Attorney General has to be some distant, faraway figure. That has just been an American norm. Donald Trump does not follow American norms. The old saying in Washington used to be, personnel is policy. Right? A lot of people out there think Trump doesn't care about policy. I think that's a mistake. He doesn't care about the minutiae of policy. He's not Bill Clinton. He's not going to be going looking for the semicolons in a document. But we know he cares about immigration. We know he cares about certain issues that he's going to push. And we know that he learned from his first experience when he found people fighting back against him, what he calls the deep state or establishment Republicans, the Rex Tillersons, the Jim Mattises. Those people aren't coming to Washington. Trump is bringing a team that he views that, that are with him, that when he says jump, they say how high. So his team is going to be his people this time. They learned that lesson. For better or worse, they learned that lesson. The bigger question for me is, he's going to have a Senate majority. How big? Right? Does Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and the one or two other voices who might say, please, sir, no. That's too much, sir, no. I suspect not. I think one of the things, yes, Trump's going to bring his people. The biggest thing to me is that the Republicans who used to stand up to him are gone. Are gone. This is his stage now. This is his stage.
Yeah, and just because you mentioned that, let's just look at that, and Manu, I'll bring you in. Senate balance of power as of now, it's not done yet. Republicans have 52, Democrats 44. There are open seats. Dave McCormick, or open races, I should say. Dave McCormick, for example, in Pennsylvania, holds a narrow lead over the incumbent Democrat, Bob Casey. We don't know how that's going to play out. And then, of course, in the House, it's too early to know. Republicans have 209, Democrats have 191, but there hasn't been a call yet in 35 seats in the House of Representatives.
Yeah, I think that the likelihood in the Senate is probably a 53-47 Senate. At least that's the way it's trending right now. McCormick seems likely to win that seat. We have not called that yet. In the House, it's trending to become a Republican-led House. We have not called that yet because there are several in California that are outstanding. But this, once again, if the Republicans do hold the House, it's going to be a narrow majority. And one-party rule, yes, you can get a lot done, but it's difficult to legislate in one-party rule. You have to be really coordinated to get things done. People have different ideology within the House Republican Conference. You have to worry about people in swing districts, swing states, people like Lisa Murkowski or Susan Collins in the Senate, which is why that one additional seat that Dave McCormick could get a pad to the Senate Republican majority could be hugely significant. If you lose Collins and Murkowski and one other, you can still pass something with J.D. Vance breaking the tie. So every vote's so critical, but it's going to require a lot of coordination, which we did not see in the first 4 years of Trump.
Real quick, I want you to speak to what John said about it's not just the numbers, it's the who fills those seats.
Yeah.
Mitt Romney's going to be gone. There are a lot of Republicans when he first came into office who saw themselves as more traditional Republicans and maybe the guardrails of whatever it was that they were fighting for. Now, most of those seats, not all, but most of those seats are with Trump-like Republicans.
Yeah, and Mitch McConnell, who was a battle
great
Donald
example.
Trump after he left office, of course, was very critical of him. he's no longer the Republican leader. He'll be still a member of the Senate, but he's going to be replaced by people who are now trying to align themselves with Donald Trump, get his support potentially in their bid for leadership. It is a much different makeup. In the House Republican Conference, pretty much all those people who voted to impeach Donald Trump are gone.
Let's go back to where we are right now, which is Donald Trump and Mar-a-Lago trying to figure out who's going to be in his cabinet or in the top positions in and around him in the administration. Listen to what his son, Donald Trump Jr., said about the approach he's taking.
I want to make sure, now that we know who the real players are, the people who will actually deliver on the president's message, the people who don't think that they know better than the duly elected president of the United States, I want to make sure that those people are in his cabinet.
That's exactly the point that John was making, is that because he has been here before, and he listened in a lot of the instances in the first go-round, like Rex Tillerson. He didn't know Rex Tillerson, and somebody said, oh, well, maybe he'll be good, or pick your person that he didn't really know. That ain't going to happen this time.
For sure not. I mean, we all remember.
Generals.
For sure.
Or generals.
We all remember the Trump transition initially very well. He was coming from Trump Tower into the Oval Office, very different. Now he knows exactly what this job is like. That's why it's history-making in a way, but it's not just he's returning to his old job. He's returning it with the wind at his back, the popular vote, likely majorities on Capitol Hill, but loyalty is something that he deeply remembers. Jeff Sessions is one of his biggest regrets. Choosing Jeff Sessions, Senator Sessions, who was the first senator.
Who was loyal at the time.
He
Of course he was. He was the first Republican senator to endorse him at the time. But we could see it play out in real time. His disappointment, his anger at Jeff Sessions. So that is sort of the starting point here. That is sort of the barometer for who he will put in some of these positions. Look, but people also know that if you join the Trump cabinet, no guarantees how long that will last. I mean, there is a long list of people, but at this point, there is a long list of people who want to be in the cabinet, who want to serve right around him. So this will be fascinating. But the biggest sort of dynamic here is that Trump knows much more about this job than he did 4 years ago, or 8 years ago, excuse me.
Good.
It's not just that Trump knows more, it's also the apparatus that has been built out in the lead up to this. So Heritage Foundation has worked day and night, basically, since the first Trump administration to train, to figure out who would be loyal, to make sure that they have civil servants that they can put in there. I mean, if Trump moves forward with one of his plans that he tried to execute at the end of the first administration, which was to make it so he could have more political appointees across the board, then you're going to see the gutting of the civil service and him putting in more of his political appointees that are already waiting in the wings because groups like Heritage Foundation have had them ready to go.
I want to stick with you for 1 second because I want to drill down even more. Of course, one of the big reasons why he won again is immigration. And he was very clear on what he wants to do on immigration. Close the border, launch mass deportation operations, stop birthright citizenship for children of illegal immigrants, ban sanctuary cities. Let's start with the deportation, because that is one of the big, most immediate questions. His sort of guru on immigration is Stephen Miller. Look at what he said last night.
When will the deportations begin?
As President Trump said, they begin on Inauguration Day, as soon as he takes the oath of office. And any caravan that's trying to get into the country now, they're going to be apprehended and sent home when Donald Trump comes into office. The invasion will end the instant that he takes the oath of office.
Yeah, I don't think people have fully realized the undertaking that requires, which is that, I mean, when you talk to border officials, they alone, Border Patrol cannot execute something like that alone. Is he going to deputize National Guard, as Stephen Miller has said that he would in the past, to deploy them into potentially blue states, which Stephen Miller has said as well, to round up undocumented migrants? Also, which undocumented migrants are they rounding up? Is it everyone? Are they focused on national security threats, which some have said that would be their top priority? Is it also undocumented migrants who have been here forever? There was a young girl at Harris's concession speech yesterday, a 22-year-old voter from North Carolina who said that she has a mixed status family. She has DACA recipients in her family, and she's terrified that they are going to be targeted when Trump comes in.
John, you spent the entire year talking to undecided voters. Obviously, the economy was the driving force for a lot of these votes that ended up going to Trump. How much did they kind of understand and agree with and approve of the kind of thing that we're almost certainly going to see?
I think you raised one of the giant challenges, A, for the American people and how they process this, and B, for the new president as he comes in. Because they think Trump's going to close the border, fix the border. Do they really think Trump's going to round up, is it 12 million people, is it 15 million people, is it 18 million people, and methodically bust them out or throw them across the border? Most no. Some say yes. Some say do that and create a legal system and then invite them back in as long as they do the paperwork. But I think one of the giant challenges here is, number one, I don't believe, please correct me if you think I'm wrong, they know the Hill better, I don't think you're going to get the votes for legislation that says a mass deportation. Right?
Does he need it? Can he do it by executive order?
Then it comes down to executive order, and then you'll have Democratic governors fighting him. You'll have some Republican governors saying, sir, I don't think this is a good idea. And this will be a test when the farmers, the big business people, the hospitality industry, the people who rely on these workers to keep the American... Does Donald Trump want to disrupt the economy he inherits by doing this? Because that's a huge risk, right? Biden's inflation hurt the Democrats. They just lost an election because of COVID disruption and then economic anxiety. Donald Trump's going to come in. The economy's actually improving. He's lucky. He inherited a great economy from Barack Obama. He's inheriting an improving economy now. But does he want to disrupt that? Because if you want to do that, think about mass deportations and what it would do to the American economy. He believes he... So that's my question. Does he mean it? Does he just want to secure? Is it, he talks big sometimes. Biden always says it's not hyperbole, folks. There's a lot of hyperbole when it comes to Trump. We think. We're about to find out.
Well, Stephen Miller certainly means it, so we'll see. Don't go anywhere, because we all know that the finger pointing is happening on the Democratic side of the aisle. Some Democrats are searching for a scapegoat. Others say, just suck it up. All are wondering what role they will play in this new GOP-controlled Washington. We'll talk about that next. You can't love your country only when you win. That was President Biden's message today, with 74 days left in office before handing the reins back over to the person who was there beforehand. CNN senior White House correspondent MJ Lee has more on Joe Biden's remarks. MJ, it was interesting to note, first of all, that he was very direct about saying that he called Donald Trump and that he wishes him well. And he tried to strike a very hopeful tone. You have new reporting on some anger, though, going on behind the scenes inside the White House and more broadly in the party.
Yeah, Dana, first of all, hopeful tone, and also clearly the president trying to console the millions of Americans that he said he understands is feeling angry and frustrated. We know that people are feeling even despondent about the idea of Donald Trump coming back to the White House for another 4 years. He said, you're hurting. I hear you and I see you. But he very quickly pivoted to the reality that in a democracy like this, when there is an election, those feelings, even if they're valid, do not change the results of the election. Take a listen.
Remember, a defeat does not mean we are defeated. We lost this battle. The America of your dreams is calling for you to get back up. That's the story of America for over 240 years and counting. It's a story for all of us, not just some of us. The American experiment endures. We're going to be okay, but we need to stay engaged. We need to keep going. And above all, we need to keep the faith.
And just across the Democratic Party, Dana, there is sadness, there is despair, there is shock that not only that the vice president lost, but how decisively Donald Trump won re-election. And I will tell you, among the Biden loyalists, those who are, staunch supporters of the president, there's real sensitivity right now to the fact that the president is getting a lot of the blame from inside the Democratic Party for what happened this week. The idea being that had he, said he was not going to seek another second term, had he sort of stuck to the pledge that he initially made to be a transition president and a bridge president for the future Dem leaders, that the party would not have found itself in this position, that they would have gone through a Democratic primary process, maybe Kamala Harris would have emerged at the top and maybe not. And there is anger at the advisors around him, too, for not dealing with and tolerating any suggestion over the years that the president step aside. This is what a senior Harris campaign official told me. They said the lack of a competitive process for a replacement, that he didn't allow for that to happen. People are still angry about the shunning that they took for speaking out earlier about him. So the soul-searching process, Dana, within the Democratic Party is clearly going to be a very, very long process.
Sure is. Thank you so much for that, MJ. And back here, I also just want to take a moment to note another part of President Biden's speech, where he very clearly and directly reminded people that the electoral process worked, that he thanked election workers, he thanked people who were involved in making sure that that democratic experiment worked, and unsaid but very clear in his remarks was, we're accepting it. And by the way, the sound of silence on any questions of fraud or wrongdoing is deafening from Donald Trump.
Yeah.
It's amazing
after they won.
It's amazing how that went away. What time was it, John? Shortly before the polls in Philadelphia closed, I think. Right before that, on election night, on Truth Social, Donald Trump was complaining. We're seeing issues in Philadelphia.
He said cheating specifically.
Right. Yeah. So no voter fraud. So I think that was good that President Biden mentioned that. It would be normal, but it's obviously it is important that he said that. Yeah.
But I want to turn back. I just wanted to note that. I want to turn back to the Democratic Party. And look, you've covered Democrats for a long time. You've covered the bad, the good, and the ugly. What are you hearing from your sources?
It's ugly. I mean, there's no doubt about that. This is the Democratic equivalent of in 2012, after Barack Obama was reelected, when at the time when Republicans said there has to be an autopsy. What happened here? There was a full-on collapse. Look, President Biden said a lot of things in the Rose Garden. We'll hear from him more. What he didn't say was his own role in this. As MJ said, he talked about being a bridge. Had he been that bridge and there had been a primary, we don't know if Vice President Harris would have won the nomination. So she won the short-term advantage of having a short primary, but in the long term, that was not good for her because voters didn't know her or feel a connection, and she didn't carve out her own identity. But look, Democrats will have a long time to think about this because they are in the wilderness now. And this does not last forever, I mean, of course, but there could be leaders out there who emerge who we don't even think of now. But at the moment, look to the governors. Wes Moore from Maryland, Gretchen Whitmer, of course, Josh Shapiro. I would probably add a Governor Pritzker in Illinois to that. Some of those people will come up with ideas. Gavin Newsom, of course, for sure. But look, the reality here is there were mechanical issues that led to this, but message issues. Look to states like New Jersey, for example. Why did Trump do so much better there? It wasn't just swing states. This is a messaging problem bigger than the candidate.
Because you brought up governors, I want to play what Governor-elect of North Carolina, Josh Stein, said this morning.
Whether you're Latino, African American, white, Asian, it doesn't matter. Everybody wants good schools. Everybody wants an economy where they have a fair shot at making it. Everybody wants safe neighborhoods. Everybody wants their personal freedoms respected. And if you talk about those issues in a way that appeals to all people, and you show that you can deliver on them and that you have a track record of getting things done, I believe the voters will reward us.
John, you and I had a little bit of a debate this morning. I was making the argument that it's not necessarily about Kamala Harris, not necessarily about Joe Biden. There is a fundamentally, deeply rooted issue with Democrats not figuring out a way to connect and, in fact, disconnecting with the very people that fueled their coalition for so long.
Right. So I'm going to hold up the map here, and we can take it in a big picture, I think, somewhere else, too. But you look at all this red, and a lot of it's in Middle America and Southeast America. So you just talked to, that was the candidate who just won a governor's race here. It's red in the presidential race. A long time ago, early in my campaigns, after Walter Mondale lost 49 states and Michael Dukakis lost 40 states, a guy named Bill Clinton from Arkansas stood up and said, the Democrats, we need to change the way we do things. I think it's that kind of a moment for the Democratic Party. So to Jeff's point, you see the blue wall has gone red again. There are Democratic governors in all of those states. So they have managed to win in a difficult environment. They have managed to not lose as many working class voters.
Which is why you disagree with me.
Democrat. So I would say this is very complicated. It's very complicated. I will tell you from 15 months on the road, I think the first building block of the Democratic autopsy has to be the invisible president. And I'm sorry, great respect for Joe Biden, great respect for anyone who holds the office. He was invisible because he cannot travel. All of his trips were to Pennsylvania. He was not out in America.
You mean when he was candidate?
When he was a president. In the first, way before we got to the primary process, Donald Trump was running for president.
It was COVID, too.
COVID, too. The MAGA, but they find a way to communicate. One of my early trips was to Milwaukee, and we had 70-year-old black women saying, "I don't think it matters. I may not vote. Where's the president?"
They also
Where's
asked,
the
where's
president?
Harris?
Harris was bottled up then. The Biden administration thought he was going to be able to be the candidate. But early on, he just was not out there. Way before we were thinking about the election, explaining, like he did today, I know inflation sucks. Look around the world. We're doing better than everybody else. What can I do to help you? That was Joe Biden's calling card, the empathetic guy, the kid from Scranton. And he was not visible in America. Yes, some of it's COVID, but some of it clearly was they didn't trust him out on the road moving around. And so what happens when that happens, right? Quickly. You come in here. Erie, Pennsylvania, right? These are the counties in Pennsylvania that voted twice for Barack Obama, then for Donald Trump, and then for Joe Biden, and they went back to Donald Trump. That's Erie County and Northampton County. I could go through Michigan, I can go through Wisconsin. The swing counties, the 50-50 counties, Donald Trump won most of them. And what do they have in common? Blue-collar Americans who, yes, care about democracy, but they also want to take their kids to Disney World, and they can't afford it. And they also are driving a car that's a little shaky, and they're afraid to buy a new one. And that just trumps everything else. Forgive the word, but it does.
And it crosses racial lines
It does.
and all lines.
I think what's key here is that there was an entire rightward shift across the entire country. It was not just in swing states, it was also in blue states, and it's not necessarily assigned to a specific demographic. And so one thing that I think stands out also, we can't have this conversation, a little bit to your point, Dana, is that maybe it's not so much Democrats' policies or messaging or the words that they use specifically, but there is an entire right-wing media ecosystem.
Yes.
It doesn't exist on the left, and it does not exist in the center or mainstream, and people are getting their information in very different ways now. And Donald Trump and Republicans and Elon Musk and Joe Rogan know exactly how to reach Americans where they are, regardless of age and demographic, and that played a big role in this because of the fact of whether it was disinformation, misinformation, or different propaganda that they were feeding to the American public that made them feel the way they did, and the American public felt as though that they were being heard by Donald Trump.
And it was the message, the effectiveness of the Trump message that, I'll fix it, right? It was very clear. What was the Harris message? It was turn the page. It was this. It was kind of a little bit all over the place. Hard to distill exactly what she was essentially running on in this very short campaign. But it will be interesting to see what lessons the Democratic leaders draw from this shellacking, especially if they are in that minority in the House. Do they try to cut deals on immigration, try to moderate on some of these issues in which they clearly lost on here, or do they believe that their best approach is to do what they did the first time, battle Donald Trump toe-to-toe on all these key issues and try to make that argument to the public? That's going to be key going forward.
I don't know. I mean, there's policy, and then there's just language and showing up.
But there were clues. Look around the world at the elections that have happened before our election. There were every sign imaginable that this was coming, that the right was gaining, that migration issues, globalization issues, technology issues were making people anxious. And when people are anxious about their lives, that's what they care about most. And so democracy gets put down. Even abortion rights got put down. People were just like, where are we going? And you had an environment where, forgive me, there was just a vacuum. It was all, that's the point right there. The Republicans have figured out communication in the digital age. Howard Dean raised money on it, Barack Obama organized on it, and then it seems like the Democrats just quit using the internet, and the Republicans have figured it out.
Yeah, we're still
And
kind
he
of
was the candidate
stuck
of
in
change, the former
2008.
president, candidate of change. That probably boils it down.
All right, everybody, coming up, exactly how would President-elect Trump deport millions of illegal immigrants, as we were talking about here at the table? We're going to take a look at the preparations. They're already underway at DHS. Don't go anywhere. Mass deportations and ending birthright citizenship. Those are just a small sample of the seismic shift in immigration policy ideas and proposals that President-elect Trump said he would carry out when he goes back into the White House. CNN's Priscilla Alvarez is with me now. Priscilla, you have been having a lot of conversations about the internal discussions going on at DHS. They're obviously not actually policy-wise preparing for this, but they're mentally preparing for new directives.
Yeah, look, the Department of Homeland Security, which is charged with immigration enforcement, is no stranger to the whiplash of immigration policy. Over the last several years, much of the policy has been made through executive actions, a patchwork, if you will. And so the officials I've been speaking with are fully preparing for there to be reversals of what they did during the Biden administration, just as President Joe Biden had reversed Trump's policies when he came into office. Now, there has been a bit of a mixed mood in the department over all of this. One source describing it to me as shell-shocked over the election outcome, while another described it to me as quite optimistic and hopeful because they do want a stronger stance on border security. So it's, again, a bit of a mixed bag internally, but this is going to be the department that will be at the center of many of the policies that the incoming Trump administration wants to execute. One of those would be mass detention. Now, I have learned in talking to sources that the Trump allies and some in the private sector have already been quietly preparing to detain and deport migrants at a large scale. Now, the private sector is involved in this because the federal government leans on contractors to manage these detention spaces. So they had already been having discussions even before Tuesday on what this could look like if he were to win. And now they are expecting those preparations to ramp up. Trump allies also in discussion about what this would look like, for example, wanting to target an operation first on those who have committed crimes, undocumented immigrants who have committed crimes in the U.S. Then there's also under consideration what to do about dreamers, those undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as children. Some of them are protected by an Obama-era program. Others are not. Mostly, this has been a population with bipartisan support. We'll see if that changes. But all of this will be complicated by money, especially when it comes to mass detention and deportation because of the detention part of this. Now, in the past, the department has been able to shift money around. But all the current and former officials I've spoken with say to do what the Trump administration would want to do would require much more money than they could ever shift around internally. So there is also that part of it that could be complicated. But look, practically speaking, these things may be hard to do, but they're not impossible, especially on mass deportation. So certainly all eyes on how exactly it gets done and how quickly. But the preparations among the Trump allies and some in the private sector is certainly underway. Dana.
Fascinating reporting. Thank you so much, Priscilla. Appreciate it. And coming up, the political postmortem is well underway. I'll speak with one of the key architects of Barack Obama's successful campaigns about what Democrats are getting so wrong. That's next. The finger pointing is well underway as Democrats digest Donald Trump's resounding victory. They're trying to figure out why he made gains in nearly every demographic group in America and where the Democratic Party goes from here. Joining me now is CNN senior political commentator, former senior advisor to President Barack Obama, the one and only Axe, David Axelrod. Thank you so much for being here. I think a lot of people are interested in you opening up your brain and explaining what's going on here. Let me just set the table with some of the exit polls. Latino men, Donald Trump did 12 percentage points better than the last time, and certainly better than not a majority of Latino men, but better than Republicans have done in the past. Black men, same thing. Voters with no college degree, Donald Trump had a 14-point jump in that, and then 2020 it was just 2 and 7. And in 2016, it was a 7-point jump. And that was like, oh, my gosh, that was a big swing. And think about where that is now. So put all of those data points in and try to sort of connect the dots for our viewers.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just say that I think that when 28% of the country believes you're on the wrong track and the incumbent president has a 40% approval rating, as he did in the exit polls, here, there was just such a strong anti-incumbent tide. So I think that is top line a fact. But I've also been concerned for a long time about the fact that the Democratic Party is becoming more and more of a suburban, college-educated, suburban and city, metropolitan college-educated party. and still considers itself the party of the working class, but approaches non-college folks, people who work with their hands, their back, as sort of as missionaries. And the message is we're here to help you become more like us. And there's a message of unspoken and unintended, I think, disdain that was felt. And, you know, John made the important point before. I said for months that if you're talking about democracy over the kitchen table or the dining room table, and I care deeply, deeply, deeply about that issue, you probably don't have to worry about the food you're on your table, about the cost of it. And the question is whether Democrats have made that the priority that people are living in their lives, and whether they're listening to people or whether they're lecturing people, and whether there are a set of issues, cultural issues, that have been emphasized that have little to do with the lives of the people who are walking away from the party right now. And I think that's a discussion that needs to be had.
One thing that I've heard you say that I completely agree with you on, and we talked about this earlier around the table, is not just about the policies. In fact, it might not be about the policies very much at all. It's about the communication and where you are delivering and how you're delivering that message, and how the Republicans are just light years ahead of Democrats in having their influencers and figuring out the algorithms to find new voters or Democratic voters or disaffected voters, or never before people who have paid attention to politics using the internet and doing it on their phone. One influential guy, Dave Portnoy, who has a podcast, Barstool, he is somebody who said after Roe that he thought it was insanity. He thought that the whole country was a mess for a lot of reasons, but that was part of it. He identifies as a moderate/independent, and yet he voted for Donald Trump. Listen to what he said.
The people pulling the strings in the Democratic Party, get rid of them. They've lost the plot. Tonight is on the Democrats. It was a ringing endorsement for the Republicans, Trump, ringing indictment against the Democrats. They got to look themselves in the mirror. This moral superiority complex they have, this arrogance they have, it's not working. It's time to wake up and see that.
Is that just a more blunt way of saying what you told me at the beginning?
So. No, I absolutely think that that's what it is. And I don't, I don't know if I put it just that way, but I think that he's on point there. The one thing I would disagree with is, Donald Trump was less popular in this exit poll by a small margin than was Kamala Harris. So I don't know whether it was a ringing endorsement of Donald Trump as much as a rejection of of incumbency, but also of this attitude that he's speaking of. I mean, I think we owe people the respect for what they do and what they mean. When all these blue-collar workers and people who do things with their hands in their back, they make this country go. They're doing important work.
And used to be the backbone of the party.
Yeah, and they feel like they are thought of as less, and that their priorities are not the priorities of the Democratic Party.
David, we're out of time, but just quickly, I know you heard a lot of people with blind quotes blaming Barack Obama for and others for getting rid of Joe Biden, and effectively blaming that move on the loss of the White House. Yeah,
listen, Joe Biden could not have won this race. He had a very low approval rating. Whether fair or unfair, he had a very low approval rating, and people lost confidence in him, and the debate was the culmination of it, just in his stamina and his ability to do the job, and that was just very evident. And she lost among the 59% who had a low opinion of Biden, job approval of Biden. She got 16% of the vote. Trump got 82% of that vote. Biden would have done worse than her. So that's just not true. and it does a disservice. Forget about Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and the others. They need to face the reality of that, and perhaps the real point was maybe Joe Biden should have decided very early that one term was enough and give the party a chance to have a primary election, and maybe the outcome could have been different, but it might not have been, because incumbent parties don't do well when people are unhappy.
David Axelrod, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Nice to see you, Dana. Thank you.
Coming up, Trump's driving force, how he built this massive winning coalition. Welcome back. It is so hard with so much to unpack and figure out with regard to what happened in this election, what's going to happen in the future, and luckily I have four very important, well-sourced minds. Manu, what is the one thing that you saw that surprised you that will change your approach to reporting on Washington and the new Congress going forward?
Well, it's hard to say anything that changed my approach going forward. But I will say that it'll be interesting to see how the Republicans react to this moment with Donald Trump in Washington. Initially, in the first 4 years, a lot of them tried to fall in line. Some of them tried to rebel. Some of them tried to stay, try to show some separation with the president here. Now Donald Trump is showing complete dominance over the top of his party. How do they fall in line? So will there be an outrage of the day that they'll have to respond to with every Trump post and every Trump tweet? Or will it be a policy-focused administration? Those are the things I think will be key to watch in the months ahead.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm going to be looking at is the Latino vote. Yes, Harris got the majority of it, but there are some signs there for them that they need to pay attention to. One thing that stuck out to me that I'm thinking about a little differently was that when I was talking to a Democratic organizer in Nevada before the election, they had said that the concerns about abortion and voters who were going to vote for more abortion access weren't necessarily translating that or connecting that to Kamala Harris. And that when you went to the doors of so many Latino voters, the first thing that they would talk about was cost of living. And so that's something that I think moving forward, Democrats are going to have to address when they talk to that demographic. Because a lot of those Latino voters, at the end of the day, that was the most important thing to them was cost of living. They didn't believe, they understood what they were voting for when they voted for Donald Trump, but they didn't necessarily actually believe in focus groups that he was going to carry out mass deportations. They didn't necessarily believe that he's going to repeal the ACA. And so that's also what led to the vote.
I think a big takeaway, not all Trump voters go to Trump rallies. And I think the Harris campaign misidentifies who is voting for Donald Trump. A North Star for me of this election is a voter that I've been in touch with in Cedarburg, Wisconsin, a place you've been, John. It's a key part. She does not like Donald Trump's rhetoric. She likes his policies and misses how the economy was, immigration a concern. So I think the Harris campaign and Democrats writ large have once again sort of misread who the Trump voters are. But the media ecosystem, how people get their news and information, puts the Harris campaign and Democrats on an unfair playing field, but they should have adjusted for it. And abortion rights that overstated, thinking how important it was in the midterm elections, just did not drive over the economy this time.
I would say that in my almost 40 years of doing this town has never been more disconnected from the people it pretends to govern. I'm going to give you an example. Just hold this up for you. Look at, if you can see this right here, look at the percentage of Americans who make $200,000 a year. This is the percentage of Americans who make $75,000 a year or less, right? So you look at Wisconsin, you see the number 200,000, that goes down even more. You look at Michigan, it's right around there. So I'm going to bring you now to Washington, D.C., right? Virginia is right here. Here's the Northern Virginia suburbs. Look at that number. 200,000 jumps up, right? That's Fairfax County, Virginia. Come into Washington, D.C. That is the point. The people who run this town, who govern in this town, inflation did not take the toll on them. The cost of living did not take the toll on them. And so when you go out in the country, the people who live out here, see all this? This is a county perspective of the presidency. The people who live here think that the people who live here have no idea about their lives. And guess what? They're right.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And the question is, how are they going to, the people who are working here and representing all the people in the middle of the country, how are they going to kind of get back in touch?
Go see them and go meet them. A fisherman in New Hampshire voted for Donald Trump, disagrees with Donald Trump on climate change, disagrees with Donald Trump on abortion. He thinks Donald Trump's going to protect his job. It's all about that. It's his life, food on the table.
Yeah. when you have a luxury, if you make enough money to care about things like democracy, then that's something you can vote on. That was what a lot of these voters were telling us. We need to be able to buy eggs and to be able to afford rent. Thank you all. Thank you so much for joining Inside Politics. CNN News Central starts right now.